ADHD. Symptoms and solutions for men and women with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Written by Heather Foreman. Narrated by Rory Young. Chapter 1. What is ADHD? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, previously known as attention deficit disorder or ADD, is a neurobehavioral condition which is identified by core signs of inattentiveness, hyperactivity, distractibility, and impulsivity. ADHD is thought to be the most typical youth mental health disorder, with rough estimates of its prevalence in kids varying from 5 to 11%. ADHD in adulthood is thought to be less typical, with around 2 to 5% of adults that have been detected. ADHD signs can disrupt work, school, home tasks, and relationships, and managing the disorder can be a difficulty for both children and adults. Thankfully, there are healings that have been shown to be effective, and anybody that is impacted by ADHD can learn survival skills to work around problems and harness their skills, as many successful people with ADHD have already done. What does ADHD seem like? Some children and grown-ups with ADHD find it hard to concentrate on jobs at school or work and may daydream often. Kids with ADHD might become disruptive, defiant, or have difficulty agreeing with parents, peers, or teachers. Children who deal with hyperactivity and impulsivity in particular usually have behavior obstacles that can be difficult for grown-ups to manage. Grown-ups, on the other hand, could be more likely to report feeling agitated or fidgety. If they cope with impulsivity, they might make rash choices that adversely affect their life. For both children and grown-ups, executive functioning, planning, psychological regulation, and decision-making is usually impacted also. Most kids and grown-ups display either hyperactive or neglectful symptoms of ADHD, but it's also possible for both sets of signs to exist together in what's generally called combined type ADHD. Is ADHD real? Most psychiatrists and psychologists agree that ADHD is real. It runs in families, suggesting hereditary roots, and neurological proof has found it to be associated with changes in brain development. ADHD is also clearly connected to academic, work, and relationship problems, and reacts to treatment, suggesting that it has medical validity. But whether the disorder is overdiagnosed and overtreated, or whether it shows a set of developed qualities that have become less adaptive in today's world, is widely disputed. What triggers ADHD? Like many other psychological health disorders, the causes of ADHD remain under investigation. Genes are theorized to play a key role, as are environmental influences such as direct exposure to toxins in the womb and early traumatic experiences. Since ADHD is a behavioral condition, expectations of proper behavior, especially in kids, likely impact diagnoses in some cases. For more on the reasons for ADHD, see Causes and Risk Factors in ADHD. How is ADHD treated? Experts have discussed whether treatment for ADHD should be primarily behavior, treatment, attention training, increased play, greater structure, or medicinal. Several large research studies have determined that a mix of both may be most effective. Is ADHD hereditary? Considerable evidence suggests that ADHD has both genetic and ecological underpinnings. Twin research studies, for example, have found that identical twins are considerably more likely than fraternal twins to be both identified with ADHD or display ADHD-like behaviors. There is no single gene that is considered the main reason for ADHD. Rather, just like many psychiatric conditions, it is thought to be connected to many hereditary versions, only some of which have been revealed. Is ADHD an illness of modernity? Some professionals argue that what we call ADHD is actually an illness of civilization. That is, a condition that arises because of a mismatch between people's evolutionary roots and our contemporary environment. High energy levels, for example, may have been adaptive for a hunter-gatherer, but are bothersome in a contemporary class. Some prominent kid development specialists have noted that the recent rise in ADHD diagnoses has accompanied an increased focus, especially in American schools, on extensive standardized testing and minimized playtime, suggesting that at least some children identified with ADHD have been put in environments that worsen the evolutionary inequality. Is ADHD a special needs? Well, it's not so easy to say. Under both the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and the People with Special Needs Education Act, IDEA, ADHD can be lawfully seen as a disability sometimes. But a diagnosis alone is not enough to get approved for some protection under the law. Other than a formal analysis, the person, and/or their parent, if in an academic setting, must also establish that symptoms considerably restrict functioning. If such constraints can be properly documented, reasonable accommodations must be provided by the company or the school, if it is public. For more on accommodations, see ADHD at school or ADHD in the work environment. Is ADHD a learning impairment? Though ADHD can and often does cause scholastic difficulties, it is not considered a specific learning disability, such as dyslexia or dysgraphia. Still, many children with ADHD, anywhere from 30 to 50% according to some rough approximations, have a comorbid learning disability. The conditions can also display similar external signs, especially in kids. I feel fidgety all of the time. Do I have ADHD? While uneasiness is definitely an aspect of ADHD, the condition is more intricate than physical uneasiness. If, in addition to consistent fidgetiness, you experience strong feelings of distractibility that continue several settings, typically behave impulsively, talk exceedingly, struggle to follow through on jobs or manage your time, and/or make careless mistakes on essential projects, you may show symptoms of ADHD. Asking for an examination from a doctor is the initial step to getting a diagnosis and starting treatment. For more about signs and diagnosis, see ADHD symptoms and medical diagnosis. Chapter 2. Is acetaminophen in pregnancy a reason for children and adult ADHD? A current Danish study released by the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, Pediatrics, raises new issues about acetaminophen use by expectant mothers, connecting it to a possible increased risk of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. ADHD can cause school problems for kids, plus work and marital concerns for grown-ups. If the association which this study has discovered shows to be corroborated by further studies, the findings could represent a significant advancement in avoidance of this aggravating disorder. Acetaminophen is a common pain reliever found in popular brands such as Excedrin and Tylenol. Its security has been well documented, and it might be used by pregnant women to alleviate fevers and pain. 5 to 6% of all kids will develop ADHD signs by age 7. Based on the research study's findings, children exposed in the womb to acetaminophen deal with an increased risk, that is, a threat of about 7%. Researchers Zayan Liu and others define their discoveries as follows. More than half of all mothers reported acetaminophen use while pregnant. Children whose mothers used acetaminophen throughout pregnancy were at higher risk for usage of ADHD medications and/or having ADHD-like behaviors at age 7 years. Stronger associations were observed with usage in more than one trimester throughout pregnancy. Results did not seem confounded by maternal swelling, infection throughout pregnancy, the mom's mental illness, or other potential confounders we evaluated. Researchers in this research study and others are contributing important clues in the search for the reasons for ADHD, as ADHD can significantly affect quality of life in both children and adults. What is ADHD? ADHD is a typical neurodevelopmental disorder. It's frequently detected in children, but it can influence adults as well. No matter what their age, People with ADHD can face problems varying from the ability to learn and get along with others to professional and relationship concerns. Choosing the right professional to identify ADHD can be challenging. However, the top three are psychiatrists, psychologists, and neurologists. ADHD symptoms and signs. Kids can be excitable, fidgety, talkative, and inattentive. However, kids with ADHD hang on to behaviors that their peers grow out of. They might be identified as mischief makers for displaying ADHD signs, such as regular daydreaming, failure to listen, forgetting or losing important things often, trouble getting along with others, squirming or fidgeting, talking too much, having trouble taking turns, taking unnecessary risks, making negligent mistakes. ADHD makes it challenging for people to reduce their natural responses to stimuli. Symptoms and signs of ADHD appear across all circumstances, home, play, and school, and generally before the age of 7. Misconceptions about ADHD in children. Both children and grown-ups with ADHD can experience positive elements of the disorder. They are often extremely smart and creative, with unique problem-solving abilities and artistic talent. People with ADHD are typically motivated, energetic, and fun to be around. While life with ADHD can be fulfilling, there are also relentless myths that can be harmful to children with the disorder, such as, all children with ADHD are hyperactive. Actually, many are calm but neglectful. Kids can grow out of ADHD. ADHD typically continues into their adult years. Medication is the best treatment. While medication is typically prescribed, it does not work for every child. Nutrition, education, behavior therapy, and exercise could be treatment choices. Kids with ADHD can choose to behave better. Children might try their best to be good, but are not able to control their conduct. Kids with ADHD will never ever focus. Actually, they are usually able to focus on enjoyable activities, but not those they find repeated or dull. ADHD impacts adults too. Grown-ups with ADHD usually were misdiagnosed as children. They might have been ignored or labeled challenging. Many manage their ADHD signs effectively throughout childhood, only to lose that capability once they maturate, with its increasing needs and duties. Symptoms and signs of ADHD in adults. For adults with ADHD, life can be chaotic. While signs are different for each individual, there are some common behaviors. Trouble concentrating on tasks or people, quickly bored or distracted, ignoring details which leads to errors, poor listening skills and trouble recalling discussions, hyper-focus on promoting tasks, poor organizational skills and constantly losing things, procrastination and trouble beginning and completing projects, spontaneous conduct or poor self-control. Undiagnosed or unattended ADHD can be ravaging for grown-ups, simply because every part of life can be impacted. Potential health issue can include compulsive eating or drug abuse issues. Other problems might include an inability to meet deadlines or hold down a job. Monetary issues can take place if spending becomes impulsive and costs aren't paid and relationships experience absence of listening or perceived insensitivity. Dealing with ADHD in the adult years. Adults may invite the analysis of ADHD because it gives them an answer to a lifelong problem. Comprehending ADHD is the initial step to managing symptoms and living totally. Looking after someone's physical health can help. Eating right, working out, and getting enough rest can even out mood swings and soothe the mind and body. Practicing time management can help manage procrastination, while setting reminders and alarms will conquer chronic lateness or the tendency to miss consultations. Working on listening skills can improve relationships, and creating a supportive workplace can increase productivity. Back to acetaminophen. The discoveries in this research study definitely give reasons for pregnant women to increase their wariness of taking medication to decrease discomfort during pregnancy. Alternatives like increased rest, acupuncture, and even old-fashioned grin and bear it might prove more positive in the long run. Chapter 3: Autism and Suicide Risk. I read Spectrum News yesterday and came across an essential short article about increased suicide risk amongst women with ASD. I went to the original short article to get more information about the research and wanted to share what I found. This research provides critical information about suicide risk in males and females with ASD, with and without intellectual impairment and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The study was published in June 2019 in Mental Medication and included more than 54,000 people with ASD and matched controls. The research was conducted in Sweden using data collected between 1987 and 2013 from Swedish country registers. The general goal of the study was to better understand whether people with ASD are at an increased risk of suicide attempts or death by suicide, contrasted with neurotypical controls. Another objective was to explore whether self-destructive actions were further increased in individuals with ASD plus attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and or intellectual handicap, ID. Finally, the authors wanted to better understand sex differences in suicide attempts, death by suicide. Methods. Scientists apart records from individuals with ASD into 4 separate groups. 1. Those with ASD without ID or ADHD, 24,535 people. 2. Those with ASD without ID with ADHD, 19,035 people. 3. Those with ASD with ID and ADHD, 2,894 people. 4. Those with ASD with ID without ADHD, 7,704 people. Within these 4 groups, researchers farther parsed the impact of sex, meaning the difference in suicide risk for males in an offered group versus females in a given group. Finally, the researchers controlled for other psychiatric conditions that are known to increase the risk of suicide, meaning depression, anxiety, substance abuse. Results. I am going to go over the findings for suicide attempts, death by suicide for each group one at a time, beginning with Group 1, ASD without ID or ADHD. ASD without ID or ADHD. People with ASD who didn't have ID or ADHD were over 4 times more likely to try suicide, contrasted with controls. Women were over 6 times more likely to attempt. When taking other psychiatric conditions into account, depression, anxiety, compound usage, the group overall was 1.7 times more likely to attempt suicide than controls. Women were 2 times more likely to attempt. In regards to death by suicide, even when controlling for the psychiatric conditions pointed out above, the group overall was over 4 times more likely to die by suicide. Women were 3.85 more likely to die by suicide. ASD without ID with ADHD. Individuals with ASD who didn't have ID but who did have ADHD were over 7 times more likely to try suicide than neurotypical controls. Women were over 10 times more likely to effort. The authors noted that amongst women in this group, approximately 1 to 5 had attempted suicide at the very least once, 20.39%. When controlling for other psychiatric conditions, the group overall was 2.3 times more likely to try suicide. Women were 2.8 times more likely to attempt. In regards to death by suicide, after controlling for the psychiatric conditions above, depression, anxiety, substance usage, the group overall was 3.6 times more likely to die by suicide compared to controls. Women were 3.15 more likely to die by suicide. ASD with ID and ADHD. People with ASD and ID and ADHD were over 5 times more likely to try suicide than neurotypical controls. Women were over 6 times more likely to effort. When controlling for other psychiatric conditions, the group overall was 2.9 times more likely to attempt suicide. Women were 2.4 times more likely to effort. There were insufficient varieties of death by suicide in this group to carry out analyses. ASD with ID without ADHD. Individuals with ASD and ID, but who did not have ADHD, were over 2 times more likely to attempt suicide than neurotypical controls. Women were over 2.5 times more likely to effort. When controlling for other psychiatric conditions, the group overall was 2 times more likely to try suicide. Women were 1.9 times more likely to attempt. In terms of death by suicide, after controlling for the psychiatric conditions above, depression, anxiety, substance usage, the group overall was 1.4 times more likely to die by suicide compared to controls. There were inadequate numbers to examine how very likely women alone were to die by suicide in this group. Generally, this study is incredibly useful concerning how to help individuals with ASD. It's bothering to see such a significant increase in risk of suicide efforts and death by suicide in people with ASD, specifically the marked increase in suicide attempts for women with ASD and ADHD. This short article underscores the value of paying more attention to self-destructive ideation risk in those ASD, and to never neglect indications of suicide. Here is a list of warning signs, though keep in mind that not all suicide attempts completed suicides have these signs beforehand. From a scientific perspective, it is essential for us to remember this increased risk. For lots of us, we were taught that ADHD, sadness, anxiety, bipolar disorders, substance use disorders, and other diagnoses come with increased suicide risk. Nevertheless, ASD isn't a condition that's usually taught as one in which suicide risk is increased. Sadly, that means clinicians are often on high alert for any signs of suicidal ideations, behaviors, in the previously mentioned medical diagnoses, but not necessarily watching as carefully for warning check in the ones with ASD. That short article is a clear signal for all of us to be more vigilant, careful about expecting these checks in ASD, and to teach clinicians in training that ASD comes with increased suicide risk. Chapter 4. When ADHD has no place to hide. The ADHD dispute. The ongoing debate about whether attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, children require drugs or discipline can't be resolved by taking a look at recommending practices cross-culturally. Dr. Marilyn Wedge asserts that in the USA, at the very least, 9% of school children have been diagnosed with ADHD and are taking medications for it, whereas in France, it is less than 0.5%. She further goes on to suggest that irregular meals, lack of structure, and weak disciplinary practices are to blame. ADHD can be seen really early. As a mother of 3 ADHD children and a clinical psychologist, I think I can offer a completely different perspective on this matter. I knew my 2 eldest sons, born 12 months apart, had ADHD long before they ever got a formal analysis. At preschool, my oldest son was once found in the reception office making an escape map with another child. I once pulled into my other child's child care center to find he had slipped out of the play area and was actually roaming around in the parking lot. At church, when other kids were sitting quietly on the seats, drawing, reading their kids' Bibles, or holding a packed animal, my boys were crawling under the pews. I would grab onto their ankles to pull them back into my sphere of control while they tried to wiggle free. Our pastor promoted regular spankings to bring them to heel, but spanking just wasn't enough. I read all the infant books and took several parenting classes, but it was not till I really understood ADHD that I realized I never had a battling chance. My children were already getting plenty of love, discipline, structure, and healthy foods. Having said that, they needed more than that, even more structure, more shorter-term rewards, and a little pharmacological assistance. Parents not to blame. ADHD isn't just another word for bad parenting. It is an inherited neural disorder that includes a host of natural problems, which includes measurable holdups in brain development. Children with ADHD have difficulty focusing on all but the most appealing tasks, are easily sidetracked, and need greater stimulus to maintain attention. There are a number of social forces that have contributed to higher rates of identified ADHD, even if there has been no change gradually in base rates of the biological elements that contribute to the disorder. Increasing demands are made on our children that put kids with ADHD at a massive downside. Here is an example. When I was a kid, we had regular recess times, long lunch breaks, and everyday athletics classes. Most schools have gotten rid of these chances for anxious kids to release a little bit of their energies in favor of more class time to prepare for standardized exams. Being expected to sit at a desk for 6 hours can be hard for any kid, and abuse for one with ADHD. My second child struggled in 6th grade, with grades ranging from A's to F's, but this was not for absence of intelligence nor discipline. Even though screening showed exceptional ability, he was just not able to sit in class all day and then come home and sit for another 2 hours doing homework. I put him a Waldorf school for 7th and 8th grade, and there was remarkable change. With little classes and many hands-on activities, like woodshop and needlework, he could keep his body and mind busy at the same time. The children learned Shakespeare not by reading the book, but by making the outfits and performing it on stage. The Waldorf school was not a cure for his ADHD, but it does show how a condition in one framework, the public school, could be alleviated in another, hands-on learning. Society progresses. The bigger problem is that in our society, more jobs need us to sit at a desk or computer system for hours at a time. On a farm, a little ADHD might not be a problem when people have acres to wander free and hard labor to keep them busy. But in the office, people with ADHD are going to have a much harder time. Having said that, I can't fault the schools since they prepare kids for this reality. The ADHD kid has nowhere to hide. My child is now a junior at a competitive college. He majors in physics and likes to play chess, blindfolded in some cases, with multiple people simultaneously. He's on the rugby group and begins every day with exercise to help him focus. He wants to be a professor at some point, yet his ADHD isn't gone. He still struggles to study for classes that he considers dull and forgets to refill his medication for months at a time. After doing a summer internship in biomedical physics, he decided to double significance in physics and biology, against my better judgment. Let's just say his grades haven't changed much since 6th grade. Chapter 5. Neurofeedback is an excellent option. Richard was a promising young student destined for medical school when his life started to decipher. He was having such an incredibly tough time concentrating while studying for the MCAT that he spoke to his physician about it. Although he had never ever had this problem before, and despite showing no other symptoms, his doctor detected him with ADHD and recommended him Adderall, an amphetamine-based stimulant. From there, the down spiral began. The medication helped, but he felt himself rapidly end up being depending on it. His everyday dose of Adderall was doubled, and quickly enough he was blowing through a month's supply in 10 to 15 days, after which he'd go through terrible withdrawals and mood swings. The mood swings got so bad that he was admitted to a psychiatric health center. Once he was released, the physician pulled him off Adderall and recommended him a non-stimulant medication, but it was too late. Richard took his own life in November of 2011. ADHD and the problem of medication. When you hear stories like Richard's, and it doesn't matter that these are the minority, you can see why many parents or caretakers who have a kid with ADHD have but one easy wish: to medicate them only if it's absolutely necessary. The huge majority of medications used to deal with ADHD are stimulants: Ritalin, Adderall and their variations, Concerta, Vyvanse, Dexedrine, and more, all work mainly by increasing dopamine activities in the brain and promoting general function through more indirect paths. It might sound counterproductive to increase activity in the brain of a person who appears hyperactive and fidgety, but since the source of the issue is underactivity in the prefrontal cortex, the medication gets this part of the brain to rev up its activity and do a much better job of focusing, changing attention, and controlling other essential brain areas. The problem is that, similar to any medication, these drugs work on the whole body and brain, and not just the specific area that needs help. This results in tons of the typical side effects of these medications, including but not limited to low appetite, sleep issues, irritability, depression, and more. Undoubtedly, when you have a growing and developing child, not eating and not sleeping are significant bad side effects as a result of their potential effect on development, and no one wants a depressed kid. To make matters worse, studies published in respectable journals like PLOS One and the American Journal of Psychiatry have found that long-lasting use of ADHD medication, particularly Ritalin, can result in reduced efficacy of the drug, aka tolerance, and also aggravating of ADHD symptoms. According to the research studies, this was because long-lasting usage of Ritalin resulted in changes in brain function that neutralized the drugs. Specifically, an increase in the number of dopamine transporters worked to reduce the amount of dopamine found in synapses to decrease the effect of the Ritalin. In order to continue getting the same relief they accomplished when they at first started taking Ritalin, the subjects needed to take a bigger dose and would feel reduced impacts if they preserved the same dosage. And when they weren't on the medication, the new adjustments actually made their ADHD signs even worse. With the number of parents or caretakers who have a kid with ADHD growing, the CDC reported a 43% boost in the number of ADHD medical diagnoses in the United States within the past 8 years, and the high chance that it will be misdiagnosed. A current research study conducted by the Michigan State University estimated that about 20% of kids diagnosed with ADHD are actually misdiagnosed. There is a real need for drug-free, non-invasive treatment. Go into neurofeedback. What is neurofeedback and how does it deal with a kid with ADHD? Neurofeedback is a form of neurotherapy that straight trains brain functions to help fix irregular brainwave patterns. It is based upon our electrical brain activity, or EEG, or electroencephalogram, for this reason also being called EEG biofeedback. At Alternatives, neurofeedback treatment starts with a QEEG, quantitative EEG brain scan, which shows the clinician how a person's brain behaves, allowing them to create a customized training schedule. Most individuals with ADHD have brain scans that reveal a mixture of too much slow brain waves, theta, and quick brain waves, beta, specifically in the front of the brain where the prefrontal cortex, PFC, is. Having way too much slow activity means that this part of the brain is underactive, and their treatment plan generally includes training their brain to speed up using a calm focus frequency called sensorimotor rhythm, SMR. The process is simple and even fun. Patients control a video game with their mind, scoring points when the PFC accelerate. Gradually, their brain learns to produce more quick brain activity in the PFC, and much of the deficit melts away. The alternative technique to ADHD. Though my primary focus at IGNTD is to help break the preconceptions surrounding addiction and psychological health and offer alternative paths to recovery that don't need abstinence, I have also helped many parents who are trying to find alternative ways to deal with a kid with ADHD. The children themselves have covered the whole age range from preschool to college. Some of the parents who have pertained to me had already started using medication and wanted to see if their child could grow without it, while others have been holding off on getting any help at all for their kids just because the thought of medicating them is too much. At IGNTD, we understand that no two people develop psychological health struggles in the exact same way, which is why we promote a customized approach to healing, whether you are recovering from an addiction or wanting to reduce the impact of mental health issues, like ADHD, for example. If unsettled, children with mental health problems might look for alternative coping techniques like drinking alcohol or using drugs in the adult years, thus increasing their possibility of developing a dependency. If your kid is fighting with ADHD, or if you just want to help them focus better, neurofeedback is an effective option. Besides the positive neuropsychological results of brain training, carrying your kid's hyperactivity into other outlets like sports or dance is beneficial for their behavioral development as well. Chapter 6. What about women with ADD? Women have ADHD as typically as men, and girls are likely underdiagnosed. Fewer girls are reported with ADHD than boys, 6.2% for girls versus 13.3% of boys. But by adulthood, about as many women have a medical diagnosis as guys, approximately 5.6% of women. That inconsistency in youth might be simply because girls are less likely to have the extremely apparent hyperactivity symptom that many, but not all boys with ADHD display. Aside from that, the evaluative requirements might be prejudiced to identify boys more readily. Studies that fix for sex bias demonstrate a pretty good number of girls who would otherwise get approved for an ADHD analysis. Women suffer at least as much as men, with a twist. ADHD has been shown repeatedly to have a substantial, negative impact on grown-ups across multiple domains in their lives, and women, as it ends up, usually suffer the exact same incidents and types of comorbidities as do men. But according to Babinski and Washbush, women do seem to stand apart in some particular areas. For example, women with ADHD may be much more affected by depression, and they have higher mortality rates than men with ADHD for their age. Perhaps because, as Babinski and Washbush note, they are victims of partner abuse, suicide, and self-injury more regularly than women without ADHD. What's going on here? ADHD women suffer more in the relationship world. Numerous studies suggest that strong relationships with partners and others are especially important for women versus guys, and that women are more likely to feel they are personally responsible when a relationship breaks down. That is bad news for women with ADHD, since at the very least, some research suggests that close to 60% of marital relationships impacted by ADHD are maladjusted. If the health of a main relationship is specifically important to a woman's mental health and general well-being, the hardships that having ADHD symptoms create in this realm would also strike women specifically hard. No matter who has it, ADHD typically brings with it poor organizational abilities, trouble starting or totally tasks, trouble remembering what needs to be done, and an easy constant distraction that often results in things not getting finished, or sometimes even took on in the first place. Though, women with ADHD take an especially hard hit in this area when compared to men, just because of social standards and expectations around who is supposed to do the daily, boring stuff of adult life. Research suggests that when women get wed, they end up with 70% more housework than they had before they were wed, while men wind up with about 12% less. In fact, women take on more family responsibility than guys in all situations, even if the woman is employed and the male partner is out of work. There is some variation in this by nation, but not a lot. This spells trouble for women with ADHD. One of the most challenging things to do when you have ADHD is use yourself to jobs that are ordinary, boring, and repeated. This defines home tasks perfectly. The resulting pattern is that women with undermanaged or unmanaged ADHD that is not successfully dealt with spend a lot of relatively inefficient time on jobs with few results. The home is a mess. The kids may or might not be well supervised, and the refrigerator is empty. Further, the car secrets have been misplaced, again, so getting to the store was not an option. As the data on housework suggest, many guys don't view it as their job to do household chores and household jobs, so when they should pick up extra duties to make up for a female partner's ADHD problems, they feel much more bitterness than do female partners of ADHD men who do the same thing. This is where the second issue enters into play. Instead of try to understand what's going on or change, non-ADHD partners, again men in specific, just see this behavior as a failure and tell their female partners to do better, then disengage from the problem in any sort of physically helpful way. Just because women are more likely to agree that they have certainly failed than guys in comparable situations, see above, they try tougher without generally resolving the problems at the heart of the problem, that is, the ADHD. They usually report feeling ashamed that they can't do what other women seem to do so quickly. The result of the combined actions of the partners is that family failures continue, deteriorating love as animosity, embarrassment, and suffering build. Family disconnect. Distractibility is the number one sign of adult ADHD. ADHD partners of both genders are typically so distracted that they aren't specifically engaged with other relatives. With ADHD, instant is more relevant than essential. Relative and partners are just one of a long list of things that might catch the attention at any given moment. As a result, relatives often feel neglected by ADHD grown-ups and behave accordingly. In the spousal relationship, partners of the ones with ADHD end up being frustrated, mad, and experience feeling lonely or deserted in their relationship. In relationships between ADHD parents or caretakers and their kids, it seems just as if comparable problems exist. Research suggests that lower levels of participation by ADHD moms have been associated with negative family results. Families benefit when women with ADHD learn the skills they need to conquer their natural, ADHD-related distractibility and focus their attention more securely on their children. Remarkably, the opposite is actually true when men in the family have ADHD. In that case, less participation by guys with ADHD enhances results for the children. This could be an entire other book or chapter, but my observations suggest it might have to do with the role that mothers have in creating stability for their kids. Greater involvement by ADHD mothers increases stability, which non-ADHD male partners might not action in to produce if the mother is sidetracked. On the other hand, non-ADHD women develop stability for their children, while their male ADHD partners add a component of chaos, making results worse. What's the repair? Here are some instant tips to improve the lives and relationships of women with ADHD. Understand that ADHD is just as serious for women with ADHD as it is for guys. It means that women really need to treat their ADHD just as strongly as guys do. See my free ebook on optimizing treatment for adult ADHD. Women must withstand the desire to think, "This is just my fault," and put blame where it needs to be placed, on the ADHD and ADHD symptoms. Take depression seriously and treat it. Again, good, sturdy medical help can help women better manage both ADHD and any associated sadness or other diagnosable concerns. The higher morbidity incidence for women with ADHD supports just how crucial this is. Analyze ADHD signs properly. Both partners need to stop associating trouble with organizing and finishing family jobs with common ethical judgments, such as lazy and unskilled. Focus instead on being understanding to the struggle that ADHD presents in daily life and finding creative solutions that help support the ADHD partner in those tasks. Put Leg 2, Behavior Treatments in place, see my treatment ebook at my site, so that the ADHD partner might operate more effectively. Working with an ADHD coach to develop ADHD-friendly organizational structures can be a great help. Handing over things like organizing, filing, cooking, or house cleaning can also be a great method. There is absolutely nothing that says that women with ADHD need to do things precisely the exact same way as women without ADHD. Have both partners learn everything they can about ADHD and relationships. The stresses that ADHD put on couples is considerable, but couples who understand the typical patterns and techniques that work for coping with ADHD can turn a struggling relationship into one they really love. Get support. Usually, male partners are not going to step in for support on the daily jobs of life. See task figures above. Join a support group for partners with ADHD or for women with ADHD. Understanding you are not alone and getting ideas for managing better provides much-needed confidence and support. Set good enough as the goal. Females with ADHD won't end up being women without ADHD, even with good treatment. They will always really need to spend energy on managing their ADHD signs. So set sensible expectations for what can and should be accomplished. Women with ADHD shouldn't compare themselves to everybody around them who do not face the exact same difficulties. Reserve time to focus on kids, if there are any at home. This skill of focusing more regularly on children and their needs can be added into an ADHD organizational system and will benefit the whole family. If not yet married but thinking of it, wait at the very least 2 years after you meet before doing so. This gets one through the hyper-focus courtship stage that the infatuation-related boost of dopamine triggers, and will provide more concrete info about how well two partners will work out ADHD issues. My experience is that most can do so well, but gain from learning the abilities they need before launching lifelong dedication. Chapter 7. Increasing physical movement minimizes signs of ADHD. Researchers from the UC Davis Mind Institute at the University of California have determined that physical movement may enhance cognitive control and the capability to focus attention for kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. These research discoveries should come as no surprise. Human beings have evolved for millennia with exercise as a crucial element of our survival, and to maintain a sound mind in a sound body. Throughout the ages, kids have grown up with intense physical activity as an integral part of their youth in the form of both work and play. Until the commercial revolution, kids spent the majority of their waking hours laboring physically or playing out of doors. How could a young mind and body that has evolved for eons to move frequently potentially adapt to the amount of sitting that kids do today? In the digital age of the 21st century, increased screen time and the absence of physical movement are triggering our mind and bodies to short-circuit. In my opinion, the epidemic of ADHD diagnoses and the overprescription of pharmaceuticals customized to help children sit still and concentrate are directly linked to a lack of daily physical activity. Forcing kids with ADHD to sit still may backfire. The June 2015 research study, a trial-by-trial analysis, reveals more intense exercise is associated with better cognitive control performance in attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, was published online in the diary Kid Neuropsychology. For the new UC Davis study, researchers led by senior author Julie Schweitzer, professor of psychiatry and director of the UC Davis ADHD program, recruited 26 children with confirmed ADHD diagnoses and 18 without ADHD symptoms to examine their patterns of exercise and movement. The researchers had the ability to correlate the strength and frequency of movement with higher scores on cognitively demanding jobs needing concentrated attention. Research study individuals with ADHD showed significantly better cognitive efficiency the more they moved their bodies. This UC Davis Mind Institute research study is the first to assess the relationship between exercise and task performance on a trial-by-trial basis in children with ADHD. In a news release, Julie Schweitzer defined the results of the research study, saying, "It turns out that physical movement throughout cognitive jobs may be a good thing for them. Parents or caretakers and instructors shouldn't try to keep them still. Let them move while they are doing their work or other challenging cognitive jobs. It might be that the hyperactivity we see in ADHD may actually be useful at times. Perhaps the movement increases their arousal level, which causes better attention." For the experiment, the movements of each individual were measured using a device that was attached to the ankle and assessed levels of activity while finishing a flanker test, which checks somebody's capability to focus attention and disregard distractions. Scores on the flanker test improved significantly when individuals with ADHD were moving. Conclusion: exercise might improve test scores for ADHD students. Forcing children to sit still in an effort to prep them for the Common Core standards and No Kid Left may backfire. The emphasis on standardized screening combined with increased sedentarism may be creating a double whammy that messes up the odds of a kid with ADHD succeeding in school. In a news release, Arthur Hartanto, a research study organizer with the UC Davis ADHD program and the study's first author, concluded, "Maybe teachers should not penalize kids for movement and should enable them to fidget as long as it doesn't disrupt the remainder of the class. They are supposed to seek activities that aren't disruptive, that allow their students with ADHD to use movement, because it helps them with thinking. Decreasing the occurrence of ADHD signs by motivating routine exercise and movement, both in and out of the class, should become a top concern for parents, teachers, and policymakers. Chapter 8. Things every client with ADHD should consider before selecting a coach. 1. Should I choose a coach who focuses on ADHD? Because true ADHD is typically neurological, many ADHDers will have continuous troubles with ADHD regardless of a genuine desire to change. Because of this, standard approaches of coaching typically won't work with somebody who has ADHD. ADHD coaches focus on understanding, developing, and leveraging the special strengths and constraints connected with ADHD. Accordingly, they are clearly qualified to help you become more successful at work, whether you are a staff member or a business owner, at school and in the house. 2. What is ADHD coaching? It is a customized kind of life or business coaching that uses specialized strategies geared towards dealing with the special brain electrical wiring of individuals with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. ADHD coaching is not an alternative to standard treatment for ADHD, such as medication, diet, exercise, and other behavior healing interventions. You may also want to think about if the coach uses a strength-based method when dealing with ADHD clients. That is, do they treat ADHD from a giftedness instead of a deficit perspective? If you are thinking about an ADHD business coach, you might find it useful to choose one that employs information-driven assessment tools that incorporate unbiased data from you, direct reports, peers, and consumers about your unique ADHD and leadership traits. This way, they can assess your strengths and limitations based on objective data. 3. How will having an ADHD coach affect the rest of your ADHD treatment team? ADHD coaching is a complement to the treatment you get from your physicians and counselor. Your ADHD coach will work in performance with your treatment group to make sure all of your signs are being managed effectively. 4. Is ADHD coaching different from treatment? ADHD coaching isn't psychotherapy. First, it normally doesn't straight concentrate on a person's past or psychological healing. Rather, ADHD coaching identifies particular actions that will help attain your life and/or business goals. It is not uncommon to work with a coach while you work with a therapist or therapist. Many ADHD coaches also have backgrounds as therapists or counselors. 5. How does ADHD coaching work? ADHD coaching is a close, continuous partnership. It isn't unusual for clients work with their coach for 6 months or longer. Coaches can either meet their clients in person or by telephone 3 or 4 times every month, from 30 to 45 minutes per call. Coaching sessions cover what's going on in the client's life and/or business, with focus on challenges, chances, using strategies for success, and incorporating feedback to change the technique if need be. 6. Does telephone coaching truly work? The answer to this question is mixed. Yeah, telephone coaching works well for most clients with ADHD. Meeting by telephone can be preferable to the logistics related to traveling to meet personally. Besides, it provides a wider variety of options in selecting a coach who specializes in ADHD, as you are not restricted by geographical location. However, there are those clients with ADHD that prefer face-to-face conferences. Additionally, you can do both, or even video conference. Guess the best answer is there are choices. 7. How do I pick an ADHD coach? Most coaches offer a totally free trial coaching session, while others offer the first 2 visits at a decreased cost. And others offer web seminars or teleconference, and will let you sit in as a visitor. Use these sessions to learn if you like the coach's style, and if what they are offering matches your circumstance. It's a pretty good idea to talk with 3 or more coaches before making your choice. When examining your choices, listen for clues that the coach comprehends ADHD and has a strong history of dealing with it. This has been ADHD, Symptoms and Solutions for Men and Women with Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Written by Heather Foreman. Narrated by Rory Young. ADHD. Diagnoses, Difficulties, and Advice for Hyperactive Children and Adults. Written by Heather Foreman. Narrated by Rory Young. Chapter 1. Do children with ADHD become grown-ups with ADHD? Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, ADHD, is a condition identified by inattentive and/or hyperactive impulsive behaviors that persist for 6 months or longer. About 6% of kids and adolescents, and about 3% of adults, have ADHD, because the signs are comparable in children and grown-ups. It has been presumed that ADHD is the same disorder regardless of age. Therefore, most physicians have concluded that grown-ups with ADHD have had ADHD since they were young, and that many kids with ADHD become grown-ups with ADHD. Regardless of this commonly held belief, there have been few research studies directly addressing this problem. An essential paper recently released in the American Journal of Psychiatry by Terry Moffat, Avshalom Caspi, and co-workers provides strong proof that difficulties these presumptions. This study is compelling just because it uses a longitudinal design involving over 1,000 individuals born between April 1972 and March 1973 in Dunedin, New Zealand. That large group of people has been carefully evaluated at regular intervals with the most current assessment at 38 years of age. This potential longitudinal design is ideal for determining what happens to kids with a diagnosis of ADHD as they get older. Additionally, it provides the investigators with the ability to look at information that have been gathered when adults with adult-onset ADHD were young. Importantly, results from this research study were not likely to be affected by treatment of ADHD, because medications were seldom used for ADHD in New Zealand in the 1970s. This research team found that 95% of the kids with ADHD no longer met requirements for ADHD at age 38, i.e., only 3 of the 61 kids diagnosed with ADHD still had symptoms sufficient for a diagnosis of ADHD when they were 38 years of age. Of the 31 adults with a diagnosis of ADHD at age 38, only 3 had ADHD as a child. There were other considerable differences between the kids and adults with ADHD. The children with ADHD were primarily male, 78%, and had cognitive deficits in addition to signs of negligence, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. Though most were no longer symptomatic as grown-ups, cognitive deficits including various functions including memory, processing speed, reading comprehension, and rapid visual processing stayed. This group's IQ was about 10 points lower than the contrast group. Those detected with ADHD as adults did not have cognitive deficits, and the varieties of females and males in this adult group were comparable. Aside from that, practically half of the adult-onset group had persistent substance dependence compared to less than a third of grown-ups who had a history of child-onset ADHD. The authors of the short article noted that they could not identify the time of start of either drug abuse disorders or the adult ADHD analysis from their data. These results suggest that individuals with child-onset ADHD and people with adult-onset ADHD are 2 very different groups. Youngsters with ADHD have signs of inattention and/or hyperactivity and impulsivity with cognitive deficits. These kids maintain some of the cognitive deficits as grown-ups, but most no longer have the large number of ADHD symptoms that they had earlier. Grown-ups with present signs of inattention and/or hyperactivity and impulsivity typically didn't have many of these signs as kids. Apart from this, almost half of these grown-ups have coexisting substance dependence disorders. It is possible that child-onset ADHD is a growth-related disorder, and brain areas affecting attention, activity, impulsivity, and cognitive function are affected by hereditary and ecological elements that were present at really early phases of development. Some of the neglectful and impulsive habits enhance as these kids grow up. On the other hand, grown-ups with ADHD symptoms may have different aspects affecting brain pathways involving attention, activity, and impulsivity, since tons of these behaviors do not seem present when these persons were children. Some of these brain systems are very likely influenced by compounds of abuse. It also promises that numerous hereditary and environmental elements affecting the brain circuitry underlying adult-onset signs did not begin to take effect until the individual was older. Exactly what causes the specific group of symptoms described by the analysis of ADHD is unidentified. It's very likely that there are a range of pathological mechanisms that might cause adult ADHD signs. Further research will be necessary to better specify clinical ramifications of the data presented in this essential research study. One takeaway message may be that it is possible that various underlying mechanisms may cause comparable symptoms in children and grown-ups. Chapter 2. The leading 7 tips to help your kid tackle ADHD. Summertime was about to end, and the only thing on his mind was being in the football team. He hated school but wanted to do anything that would get him on the field again. Julian did not want to re-experience last year. Athletically, he was on cloud 9, starting in football, basketball, and baseball. Intellectually, the world was on top of him, stressed with low grades, discipline issues, and missing out on homework assignments. Because of the latter, the school stopped him from stepping foot on the field of dreams and told him to study better. For Julian, it was the absolute worst of both worlds. Just when he thought things could not get any worse, they did. His parents registered him in a popular inspirational tutoring program, which promised better study skills, better organizational skills, and better grades. Even though he did not like it, this was his ticket to the world of sports. Yet after 6 long months, his grades still had not improved, and he was again unable to play sports. Discouraged and beaten, his confidence diminished even further. Julian went from a person who made scholastic mistakes to feeling like he was an error. Something has to give, his parents or caretakers told me during the consumption meeting. We are losing him. We have tried every little thing and don't have a clue on how to help our son. Upon completing an assessment, we realized Julian didn't have an inspirational, organizational, or a research study problem. Julian had ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. Following his analysis, we created a treatment plan that dealt with both his short-range and long-term needs. To meet Julian's short-range attention needs, a doctor prescribed medications to help him focus. For his long-term attention needs, we placed him on Play Attention TM, a computer-based attention training system that has been educationally proven to help children develop their ability to focus and lower impulsivity. We also included learning style training to help him harness his natural style of learning, and parent training to enhance the behavioral changes we agreed upon. In all, Julian began to better understand how ADHD was impacting his life, learned how to better manage the difficulties related to the disorder, and developed his capability to focus. 12 months later, Julian had taken control of his life and is off medications, and is succeeding academically and athletically. This season, his parents will proudly sit in the stands watching him play in his first high school football game. Here are some steps I recommend you take to help your daughter or son tackle ADHD. 1. Become your child's parent advocate. You should learn as much as possible about ADHD. It is critically important to comprehend the challenges your kid may face and the resources readily available. Know the instructors, the treatment team, and the law. I recommend the following book to any potential parent supporter, Special Needs Advocacy Resource Book by Michelle Davis. 2. Put an interdisciplinary treatment team in place. And before school begins, get in touch with your psychologist, doctor, nutritional expert, neuropsychologist, and/or coach to prepare for the approaching year. Have them evaluate your kid's learning style, neurological performance, strengths, and constraints. If possible, choose instructors that play to your child's strengths. Besides, Speak to your companies about correct nourishment and computer-based attention training programs. While medicines help manage the symptoms in the short term, recognize that tablets don't teach abilities. Sound nutrition, proven computer-based attention training programs, teaching children to maximize their learning style, and building scholastic confidence permanently enhances attention and teachabilities necessary for success in the classroom and with good friends. 3. Develop a schedule and pursue consistency and structure. Starting a week or two before school starts, readjust bed and wake-up times. With young elementary school-aged kids, eliminate the fear of the unknown by introducing them to their new school, instructor, and bus schedule before the first day. Children with ADHD function much better if they know what to expect. Apart from this, let your child get comfortable with the new supplies, organizational and/or attention training systems they will be using this year. 4. Make meaningful behavioral changes. As you well know, kids with ADHD are frequently spontaneous and usually look for instant satisfaction. Accordingly, they tend to do best when given more instant and regular feedback and repercussions. You might also consider using incentives before punishment and pursuing consistency. I also recommend the following book to any parent of a kid with ADHD, Organizing ADHD, The Complete Authoritative Guide for Parents, by Russell A. Barkley, Ph.D. Though it may be tough sometimes, try not to individualize your kid's problems or disorder. Inattentive and spontaneous behaviors are really common signs of ADHD, which professionals conservatively approximate influence between 5 to 7% of school-age kids. 5. Be positive. Your kid's biggest liability might be their thoughts rather than their reality. Beliefs determine habits. If your child approaches the new school year with the fear that they are about to live out their worst headache, it will end up being a self-fulfilling prediction. Be sensible, be positive, and be loving. If you don't have faith in them, why should they have faith in themselves? I know it can be aggravating, but let your child know that whatever the school year may hold, we will make it through it together no matter what. Let them know that you are in their corner, fighting with them, cheering for them, and happy with them. Aside from that, find and teach them about some of the many exceptionally effective adults with ADHD. 6. Celebrate each success. Our children will hear plenty about their flaws and their failures, so make sure you celebrate their successes, even small ones. 7. Last but not least of all, look after yourself. Contact CHAD, Children and Adults with ADHD, and join a support system. Besides, go after a hobby or some other personal passion you might have dropped over the years. Chapter 3. Is the ADHD diagnosis handy or dangerous at all? A medical disease or a subjective viewpoint? We should move from treating their interruption as a scientific illness to targeting the best ways to help children maximize their ability to focus. So says Dmitry Christakis, a pediatrician at the University of Washington School of Medicine, in today's New York Times debate on whether the ADHD analysis is handy or hazardous to children. Christakis mentions that giving a child an ADHD analysis is a subjective process on the part of parents, teachers, and doctors. In one of the most commonly used and well-validated diagnostic tests, a child needs to demonstrate 6 of 9 specific behaviors on a standardized form to be diagnosed, and thereby get approved for impairment accommodations. But the assessments, usually finished by an instructor and parent, are subjective. They must decide, for instance, whether a kid often has difficulty organizing tasks and activities, or really often. ADHD is a failure to comply with societal expectations. Philosophy professor Susan Hawthorne thinks that ADHD is a failure to conform to societal expectations, not a health condition akin to diabetes. Present standard knowledge is that ADHD is a persistent, physical, and clinically curable condition, comparable to diabetes, but this isn't the case. The diagnostic requirements truly gauge whether kids, or teens or grown-ups, struggle to meet today's social expectations. According to Hawthorne, kids are detected with ADHD not simply because they experience problems, but because they are difficult to manage, like a very active young child who will not sit quietly at circle time. And again, social failure accounts most acutely for the diagnoses of this disorder. Medication, she says, may help children in the short term, but research shows that ADHD medications don't produce improvements in long-lasting education or work achievements. Medication is not always the answer. The opposite side of the argument is represented by Tanya Froelich, partner professor of developmental pediatrics at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. Even though Froelich admits that overdiagnosis and medication misuse is a widespread concern, she also thinks that children who struggle are helped by the diagnosis, which gives them access to special help in the class. Medication, though, is not the only answer for a kid who shows ADHD-like symptoms, argues Froelich. The attention and self-regulation capacities of all children can be improved by increasing physical activity, keeping a healthy diet plan, improving sleep, restricting electronic devices, teaching organizational skills, and increasing structure and consistency at home and in school. Pediatricians should take a larger role in educating families about these critical lifestyle interventions, in addition to identifying ADHD and handling its medical treatment. Froelich also explains that kids should not be detected in a 10 to 20-minute visit to the pediatrician. It is the doctor's job to eliminate the many other diagnoses and scenarios that can produce ADHD-like signs by carefully talking to the family, carrying out a physical examination to rule out mimicking health conditions, and vigilantly collecting information from the school. I advise parents or caretakers, medical professionals, and teachers to look at the argument presented in the Times today. The series of articles makes it clear that the hard line separating ADHD-like conduct from regular childhood reactions to ecological stress or normal developing stages is beginning to soften. In that respect, the debate that the Times presents is motivating and long overdue. The number of ADHD medical diagnoses in the United States has exploded by 300% since 1983. With a stunning 12% of America's kids getting the ADHD analysis, it's time to look at the social, environmental, academic, and financial elements that have provided steam to the exploding epidemic. Chapter 4. Social Difficulties of Children with ADHD. For children, the most tough part of having attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, is typically the social difficulties it triggers. Turned down and friendless. According to Betsy Hoza and her associates, over half of children with ADHD are commonly done not like by their peers. And this infers that when scientists ask children to in complete confidence name the schoolmates, they like most and the ones they like least, kids with ADHD get few like votes and a lot of dislike votes. 65% of children with ADHD have no reciprocated relationships, which is nearly twice the number of normal kids without friends. Hoza et al., 2005. Even when children with ADHD do have friends, these friendships have a tendency to be of lower quality and less steady than those of typical kids. A longitudinal research study found that over a 6-month period, 1 out of 4 kids with ADHD lost their good friend, while only about 1 of 10 common children had their friendship end. Kids with ADHD have considerably worse social skills than other kids, according to scores by parents or caretakers, teachers, and observers. Speculative research studies show that children with either the hyper or the inattentive form of ADHD can experience rejection within hours of meeting unfamiliar peers. Social skills deficits in kids with ADHD. What is it that kids with ADHD do that's so off-putting to their peers? The continuously activity, impulsive actions, and more regular aggressiveness of children with the hyper or combined kinds of ADHD are clear sources of annoyance to peers. They are more likely than other children to argue and begin fights. But kids with the inattentive form of ADHD can also have social issues. They may appear withdrawn or not thinking about others. They may also make social mistakes because of a lack of consciousness of others' emotions or difficulty handling their own emotions. Normand and his associates observed the conduct of both 7 to 13-year-old kids with ADHD and comparison children while playing competitive and cooperative games with a friend of their picking. Compared to other kids, throughout the competitive game, the children with ADHD were more likely to break guidelines and act bossy. Throughout the cooperative game, they made more self-serving suggestions. Concentrating on the bright side. And yet, I have a special place in my heart for kids with ADHD. They are typically very creative and enthusiastic about their interests. Their energy and zest can be extremely attractive. Their rapid leaps from topic to subject can be entertaining and even thought-provoking. To help these children navigate the social world, we really need to attend to the particular barriers that prevent them from getting in touch with their peers. Chapter 5. Can grown-ups with ADHD truly change? I am who I am, and I cannot change are more about fear than reality, and do not reflect the science around ADHD. Recently, a non-ADHD partner wrote me in despair, saying, "My ADHD partner says he's got a mental illness and he cannot change. How can we potentially enhance our relationship?" Her anguish in the face of her partner's unwillingness to try ADHD-friendly strategies for improving his side of their relationship was palpable. Take it or leave it is a dreadful method to a relationship when either of you is miserable and having a hard time. I think that this ADHD partner's remarks reflect his past battles in handling ADHD signs, such as interruption, poor memory, and poor time management. They also very likely reflect that he has not actually enhanced his treatment of his ADHD symptoms. Repetitive failures at doing things have led him to really believe that he is a person who is not capable of doing things. Research actually suggests that it is more likely than not that he can change how he engages with the world, quite significantly, if only he wants to optimize his ADHD treatment to do so. Russell Barkley, one of the most experienced scientists in the world of ADHD, wrote in his book, Taking Charge of Adult ADHD, "Studies show that ADHD medications can stabilize the behavior of 50 to 65% of the ones with ADHD and considerably improve the conduct of another 20 to 30%. As much as I dislike the word normalize, it does suggest the level to which good ADHD treatment can help. When people think about mental disorder, they do not think about 70 to 80% of the population with an issue having the ability to resolve it that well. And, to be clear, the research also demonstrates that medication alone is not the best treatment, but more on that in a minute. When it concerns the man above, uncertainty, fear, and too little knowledge are the real adversaries, not his ADHD. That is rather common in adults with ADHD. They have a lifetime of people telling them they're underperforming. If you would only try tougher, you could do so well. Why on earth did you do it that way? And years of repeated mistakes and failures which they had trouble clarifying or responding to. Over the years, they have learned that the amount of effort they expend usually doesn't correlate with a positive outcome. Frequently, ADHD symptomatic habits like diversion and poor memory got in their way. It's no wonder adults with ADHD often lack confidence in their ability to change their world. Combining a broad variety of ADHD treatments results in life changes. Enhancing your treatment of ADHD means using several techniques all at once. I explain treatment to my clients as having 3 legs. Leg 1. Physiological treatments that change the chemistry of the brain where ADHD comes from. Exercise, medications, and mindfulness training all fit into this leg. Leg 2. Behavioral and practice changes that help ADHD grown-ups be more dependable. Calendars, lists, alarms, and a really large variety of external structures and systems make up Leg 2 treatments. Leg 3. Interactive changes that enable neutral and positive interactions around ADHD issues. Establishing chore meetings with a partner, and using verbal hints to stay participated in a conversation are just 2 examples. ADHD adults should choose as tons of the different treatments as they can to see which work to resolve their particular target signs. Usually, more is better. specifically if the adult with ADHD has a common sense of the most crucial target symptoms they wish to measure their progress against. Those symptoms are the ones that, if resolved, would lead to the best enhancement in their life. I do not wish to suggest that it is easy to change routines in a way that will improve the life and relationship of an ADHD adult. It requires time and effort to find the right medication and dose, set up a very good exercise and sleep routine, learn how to effectively and consistently use a pointer system, and produce better communication with your partner around many topics, just to name a few treatment alternatives. There are ADHD-savvy ways to do these things, i.e., trying differently, not just trying tougher the way non-ADHD people do things, but the results of that effort can amazing. Can grown-ups with ADHD really change? The research says resoundingly yes, and my experience enhances this. If your partner says, "I can't change," be understanding. There are many reasons she or he would say this. Carefully help your partner learn the facts, create a safe place to try, and fail, which is part of trying new things. Consider getting the help of an expert who understands adult ADHD. The bottom line? Don't let fear and past negative experiences dictate your future. Chapter 6. A non-medicinal treatment for ADHD and why it functions. According to the National Health Interview Study, the prevalence of ADHD in children 4 to 17 years of age was 10.2% in 2015-2016. ADHD is a neural condition that impacts brain functions important for school and work success. The condition most noticeably affects a group of cognitive functions known jointly as executive functioning. Those include inhibition, working memory, and cognitive flexibility. Inhibition is the ability to withstand diversion and maintain focus. Working memory is the ability to hold and control info presently in use. The last area, cognitive versatility, is the reverse of mental rigidness. According to the most current edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness, there are 3 types of ADHD: hyperactive impulsive, inattentive, previously represented as ADD, or combined type. Children with the hyper type might act as if they're driven by a motor and often have poor impulse control. They tend to find it challenging to sit still in a conventional classroom. Kids with neglectful ADHD are better at mixing in, simply because they can sit still. However, as schoolwork becomes more demanding, their ADHD signs usually become more apparent. They are quickly sidetracked, forgetful, and regularly daydream. Combined type ADHD, as its name suggests, is a combination of the hyper and inattentive types. ADHD symptoms negatively affect executive functioning, resulting in weak impulse control, poor decision-making, and trouble shifting from one task to another. Because of this, the child becomes disappointed. This usually manifests as behavior issues and emotional dysregulation. Treatment, for that reason, is essential in decreasing the kid's aggravation and increasing their day-to-day performance. Proof suggests that a mix of treatments, including medication, behavior therapy, and dietary changes, is often most efficient. Most studies have also pointed to one particularly protective solution: exercise. In one study, scientists arbitrarily designated 8- and 9-year-olds to a 9-month after-school fitness program, Fit Kids, or to a waitlist control group. All individuals performed cognitive jobs that examined attentional inhibition and cognitive flexibility, while measuring brain electrical activity before the interference, physical fitness program/waitlist, and after. Scientists concentrated on a particular brainwave signature that has been associated with attention, working memory, and cognitive processing speed. The fitness group improved more than the waitlist group on precision and speed on the executive function jobs. Especially, the brainwave signature for focus and attention was more extreme in the fitness group than the control group. It was substantially greater in magnitude and arrived quicker for the fitness group. There are many studies vouching for the exercise prescription for ADHD. Another research study, published in the Journal of Attention Disorders, revealed that moderate to energetic exercise for 45 minutes 3 times a week enhanced cognitive functioning and behavior in kids with ADHD. They were cognitively quicker and demonstrated more effective info processing. One study revealed similar results but added an important consideration: sex. Many parents, medical professionals, and instructors will tell you that in general, boys and girls show their ADHD signs differently. According to the findings of this research study, boys might need more vigorous exercise than girls to gather the advantages of exercise on attention. In summary, these results suggest that exercise can increase focus and speed up cognitive processing in kids with ADHD. Why would workout improve ADHD symptoms? Exercise is an exceptional outlet for stress, which worsens signs. Exercise can take in restless energy and alleviate anxiety. Anxiety typically co-occurs with ADHD, further troubling attentional processes and other cognitive abilities. Exercise increases substances in the brain called brain-derived neurotrophic elements. These neurotransmitters are crucially involved in learning and memory. Some studies have suggested that people with ADHD have a lack of these supporting chemicals. Exercise targets tons of the same neurotransmitters stimulated by health treatments for ADHD. For the ones with the hyperactive type, exercise can be a useful way to launch extreme energy and fidgetiness. In general, higher levels of fitness lead to a much healthier brain and body. Indeed, an unhealthy body can seriously interrupt cognitive faculties like attention. What sort of exercise? Many kids who have issues with ADHD have low self-esteem and confidence. I would advise parents or caretakers to keep away from highly competitive sports that need challenging schedules and a very fast lane, unless the kid is naturally talented or particularly driven. Sports such as cross-country might be best for kids and teens with ADHD. The type of sport can differ. Most crucial is to find something your child enjoys, and that you motivate and support them to regularly engage in it. Treatment decisions can be hard, particularly given the bad side effects of medications and cost and time dedication needed for behavioral therapy. However, no matter the chosen treatment, exercise can be an excellent restorative adjunct with potentially big impacts. Chapter 7. Are you a mom with ADHD? ADHD moms. 5 leading tips to feel calmer. Do you have ADHD and feel overloaded with attempting to balance working and being a mom? When you get home from work, are you instantly assailed by your kids? Are your early mornings chaotic and difficult? Many of my patients with adult ADHD are also mothers. Being a mama requires focus, company, planning ahead, multitasking, and aggravation tolerance. All of these present difficulties for parents with ADHD. Take Sandra, for example. She is a 40-year-old married woman and a mama. She has 3 children and works in the real estate field. For many years, she worked very hard just to keep up. Nonetheless, having ADHD and being a mama just tipped the scales. She was diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety in her early 20s, and presently takes Ritalin and Zoloft to manage these conditions. Still, Sandra feels a lot like her life is out of control nowadays. She feels exhausted in the early morning, attempting to get herself ready for work and her kids ready for school. And when she comes home from work, she rushes to prepare supper at the last minute. Though her husband is very involved with family duties and parenting, Sandra feels like she's drowning. Just recently, Sandra visited her primary care physician for a yearly test. Upon finding out about Sandra's obstacles with balancing responsibilities, her physician referred her to me for ADHD therapy using cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Aside from treatment, I recommend some daily strategies to practice in the home if you're a parent or caretaker who identifies with Sandra's circumstance. Here are 5 strategies that many of my patients who have ADHD and who are parents have found helpful. Create a family calendar and ADHD moms. Create or buy a large month-to-month calendar and place it in the kitchen where everybody can see it. Location all of the activities and events for the family on the calendar, as well as in your personal calendar. This will help keep everybody on the exact same page. Come up with a chore chart and ADHD mommies. Weekly tasks help the kids feel part of the family and create structure to help you keep the house in order. Depending on the kids' ages, some of the chores may include cleaning up the table, cleaning the meals, taking out the garbage, and walking the pet dog. Other than raising some of the burden on your shoulders, this can free up time to utilize needed coping techniques and minimize stress. Establish family rules and ADHD moms. When creating home rules, it can be effective to have the entire family take part. That helps each person feel a sense of ownership. The guidelines will differ from family to family and the ages of the children. Guidelines might include expectations on how to treat each other, bedtime, homework, screen time, and housekeeping obligations. Evaluation rules much as needed. Organize kids' keepsakes. As you know, having ADHD can cause having piles and piles of documents around the house. School-age children tend to make a significant contribution to the clutter. Create an organization system for each child. I advise that you designate a file box for each child, split by school year with separate folders for artwork, awards, and grades. Additionally, have a plastic storage box for each child's keepsakes. Make sure to label the year and any other considerable info. Finally, create a rack or display for each kid's room for trophies and other essential souvenirs. All these steps can help keep stacks and anxiety from structure. Make sure to plan meals. Rather than racing to toss meals together after a difficult day at work, extract a strategy for the week. What needs to be chopped, defrosted, peeled, or picked up from the grocery store? Delegate meal preparation jobs to family members who might get back first, or use weekends to pre-prepare dinner active ingredients. Rate potential dishes on how quickly they can be made. On longer days, you can draw on your easy meals of spaghetti or store-roasted chicken. Make time to recharge for mom. It is important for every single parent to recharge. Set up with your partner times that each of you can take a break from the family and do something for yourself, whether it is exercise, spending quality time with friends, or some other enjoyable activity. Make certain that you don't disregard your relationship. Reserve time to spend together without the children. Parenting is a full-time job without weekends, so even just a few minutes to silently read a book or an hour at the health club can be useful. Sandra and I worked together for 3 months. During our initial meeting, we developed treatment objectives for her ideal work and home life. At each session, we talked about one of the challenges she dealt with and developed a strategy to help her progress. She started using a family calendar for every single family member's activities and events. We discussed the aspects of a chore chart that she went over with her family. The kids were at first hesitant, but after several weeks, they started to enjoy being more engaged with the family and took pride in attaining their rewards. The technique Sandra enjoyed the most was making time for herself. She and her partner consented to keep one night free to hang around with her good friends and Sunday early morning to exercise. Ultimately, Sandra was less overloaded and more confident in her ability to deal with the daily bustle of a working mom. There was less chaos in the home and a lot more chances for pleasant family time. As you start to use these techniques to produce a calmer home, remember to forgive yourself on days when absolutely nothing seems to work. Success does not appear like excellence. It appears like determination. So parents, continue. Chapter 8. More sex for ADHD people. When one partner in a couple has ADHD, it impacts both of them, as does everything else about both members of a couple. So, when one romantic partner has ADHD, that tends to evoke certain types of reactions from their non-ADHD partner, which then impacts the first partner, and around we go. This influences their relationship as a whole as well as their sex life, as I cover extensively in my new book, ADHD After Dark: Better Sex Life, Better Relationship. Some couples find ways to interact and do well, while others get stuck in a no-win tug-of-war. This is especially likely before the ADHD is diagnosed and dealt with, leaving both partners at a pretty serious disadvantage to understand why they keep having the exact same battles. ADHD does not necessarily produce new struggles for couples, so much as that it worsens the universal struggles that every couple needs to wrestle out. How do we stabilize one another's different needs, preferences, and ways of doing things? The couples who manage this well tend to have more and better sex, since it is hard to actually open oneself up sexually when there are a lot of unsettled disputes. Treatment helps. The good thing, though, about ADHD is that it tends to react well to treatment. Getting a health diagnosis can feel like the grand revelation at the end of the mystery novel. Suddenly all those random pieces fall into place and make sense. But, like most things in life, you need to work at it, and both partners have their part to play. I did a big online survey of couples with one ADHD partner, looking at their relationship and sexual fulfillment. 3,000 folks completed the survey. Not surprisingly, those participants who felt that their partner put in the most treatment effort on managing ADHD tended to put in more effort themselves and also found treatment to be the most efficient. Related to this, the ones that used more treatments also found it more reliable. Simply put, not just medication, although it tends to be very efficient, but also educating themselves about ADHD, working on living style elements like sleep, or dealing with a therapist, coach, or organizer. On the other hand, those respondents who felt that ADHD had the most negative influence on their sex life felt that they themselves put in the most effort, but that their partners put in the least. That has a double whammy on their sex life. First off, if their partner isn't putting in much effort on managing their own or their partner's ADHD, treatment is not as likely to be reliable. So improperly managed ADHD will have more of an impact on the couple's life and relationship. However, there's also the resentment of feeling like one is working harder than a person's partner, and that it is this lack of effort that is responsible for those added struggles. Whether or not it actually is might not matter if that low-effort partner is blamed for it. In relationships, perceptions matter more than the reality. ADHD treatment effort is an aphrodisiac. Those study respondents who felt that their partners put in the most effort on managing ADHD made love 60% more often than those who felt that their partners put in the least effort. 92 times each year versus 55. That seems like a difference you would feel. Certainly, those folks who ranked their partners as putting in more effort felt that their partners were doing a lot of other things right also, and were certainly rewarding that good effort with kindness of their own. Those romantic partners were on the exact same group and worked well together to common objectives. Undoubtedly, problems showed up, but they found efficient ways to solve them, then held themselves to those agreements, and gave their partner a courteous nudge if they felt their partner was slacking. Bring your best. This integrity and good behavior goes way past ADHD and applies to every couple and every subject. More sex is great, and it is essential as a way for partners to connect, but it represents tons of other good behavior in the relationship. Life brings all sorts of challenges to couples. In some cases, it includes bridging differences between partners. At times, it includes attending to external stressors. Either way, the couples who do best are those that are most able to work as a team, in bed and out. If your sex life isn't what you want it to be, and you or your partner have ADHD, then you might gain from having some serious discussions about what you are both doing to do something about it. The people who work better as a group by day tend to get together more regularly at night. Chapter 9. It doesn't work for everybody. ADHD is expressed in many different ways. ADHD is not a one-size-fits-all condition. This is because ADHD takes advantage of a more general process called self-regulation. Self-regulation impacts everything from how we deploy our attention to whether we're spontaneous to how we manage our feelings. Some children with ADHD also tend to sadness or anger. Their struggle with self-regulation means they have a harder time dealing with those feelings than someone without ADHD. They are spontaneous, inattentive, and vulnerable to anger control problems. Other children with ADHD tend to be exuberant and outgoing, and risk-taking. They have a more difficult time managing these impulses than someone without ADHD, and so they go to extremes. Another sort of difference is in energy level. Some kinds of self-regulation issues lead to problem-inhibiting conduct, so some people with ADHD are extremely active and spontaneous. Others lead to problem-activating behavior, so a kid or adult has a sluggish tempo and struggles to initiate their activity when they should. Some individuals are both impulsive and sluggish. Their energy waxes and wanes. That is another indication of difficulty in control. A final example is attention. You may have noticed that a kid with ADHD cannot focus on homework or conversation, yet can be taken in for hours in a computer game, and after that, can't handle transitioning away. Those two sorts of attention problems, underfocus and overfocus, have the exact same root. They are both problems with the self-regulation of attention. On the one hand, they can't focus when they should. Then again, their attention is captured easily by fascinating stimuli, like a computer game, and it's hard to break away. Likewise, even though it's usually impossible to trace the cause of ADHD in a specific child, we know that at a population level, ADHD has many contributing causes and risk aspects. It's definitely affected by genetic predisposition, but also by perinatal problems, maternal and paternal health, early social experiences, diet plan, at the very least in some cases, and exposure to pollutants. The mix of causes and effects may differ in crucial ways within the population we consider having ADHD. We are increasingly able to see dependable and distinct scientific profiles of the sort pointed out above. We are also beginning to see different levels of hereditary risk. Distinct brain imaging profiles are beginning to show up and will eventually be validated. It appears very likely that there are very likely several ways to have ADHD and some forms of it. Science is still finding out how to specify these variations in a way that is most precise in the clinic. The outcome? Customize your plan. With this in mind, it is necessary to customize the action plan for yourself or your kid with ADHD. Your plan should consider the best practices and best proof for ADHD as a whole, yes. However, that likely will not be enough, other than for a fortunate few. Many people will also need to carefully consider what's unique about their kid's character and background. Putting together what you know about yourself or your kid and family, and what a professional know about ADHD in general, can make it possible for a personalized method matched to your situation. Unfortunately, we aren't yet at the point where genetic testing can anticipate which medication or treatment is right. The day is coming, but hang on to your wallet for the moment. Yet, careful examination can get close. For instance, stimulant medication works well for ADHD, but it works better if a parent-child relationship also becomes more positive through therapy. If a kid with ADHD is also quite restless, then counseling considerably enhances the outcome. An upset child might respond better to rewards than to severe penalty. An exuberant child may really need more social outlets. Those refinements wait for further research studies to validate the best matching technique. Eventually, we wish to discover the right prediction models to know which individualized plan is right for each child. Till then, it is an important matter of combining the best expert guidance with some individual experimentation and good sense. The key? Recognize that what works for one child with ADHD may not apply to another child with ADHD. More than one variation exists. This has been ADHD, Diagnoses, Difficulties, and Advice for Hyperactive Children and Adults. Written by Heather Foreman. Narrated by Rory Young. ADHD. Traumas, Symptoms, Medication, Treatments, and Tips. Written by Heather Foreman. Narrated by Rory Young. Chapter 1. How ADHD Adults Cope Before Treatment. Coping in the Dark. What I always intuitively did, from early, was to stay away from any kind of dependence commitment. Any kind of commitment, even a club membership, where you really need to go to meetings 5 times a year, whatever, even that would have felt restricting. The above declaration is how one adult in a just recently released research study defined attempts to handle symptoms of undiagnosed ADHD. Another subject defined surrounding myself always with a lot of people as it never attracted attention when I behaved specially obnoxiously. Other compensation strategies included being overly punctual, studying in a cold basement as a way to reduce distractions, having actually carefully structured checklists for each work step, and finding ways to work without paper by dealing with workers who work only on call without written appointments. Canela et al., 2017. ADHD symptoms. The research study, which was based upon interviews with 32 patients in a Zurich teaching healthcare facility outpatient clinic, looked at ways in which undiagnosed and without treatment grown-ups with ADHD tried to manage their signs by themselves. The core signs of ADHD often manifest differently in grown-ups than in kids. Hyperactivity might be uttered as fiddling, failure to unwind, as uneasiness or being not able to sit still for longer periods while studying, at work, or in a film. Impatience, interrupting others in discussions, impulsive behavior, changing jobs regularly, beginning a firm on impulse, changing sexual relationships are typically expressions of impulsivity, though inattention usually shows itself as lapse of memory, poor organization, not listening to others in discussions, or being late. Canela et al., 2017. ADHD symptoms, according to Russell Barkley, Ph.D., result from brain distinctions of disordered self-regulation and executive functioning. As such, people with ADHD can't just try harder or think their way to a repair. Like the old Apple commercial, they need to learn to think, and more crucial, to act different. Estimates for the occurrence of ADHD in adults differ and are definitely filled with debate. However, using conservative numbers on average, in a group of 50 adults, at least 1 or 2 will have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, understood in Europe as hyperkinetic disorder. According to Scott Shapiro, MD, 3/4 of these grown-ups never receive an accurate analysis or reliable treatment, despite having had the condition since youth. Over their lifetimes, undiagnosed grown-ups with ADHD might develop certain coping mechanisms and payments, some more useful than others, without understanding why they are doing so. Another example from the Zurich study is always having several backup plans for any situation that may not go as expected. I have systemized my everyday routine myself and have developed techniques for a clear structure. I also always have a plan A, B, C, and D. I just couldn't deal with situations that were not as I had expected. I used to flip. Some coping systems might appear like obsessive-compulsive behaviors, but in an interview with Stephanie A. Sarkis, Ph.D., Ari Tuckman, Psychology, MBA, explains the distinction. Some grown-ups with ADHD can look somewhat obsessive or compulsive about what they do, for example, checking to make sure that they actually turned off the cooktop. The difference between that and true OCD is that OCD makes an individual less functioning. The individual with OCD doesn't check the hot plate once or twice, they check it 10 times. For the individual with ADHD, the checking is based on a precise self-assessment that they may have forgotten to turn off the stove, simply because their experience has taught them that this is the sort of things that they in some cases do. In this case, these behaviors are helpful, in contrast to true OCD habits that really lock the person down and minimize their ability to cope with the world. Coping, resiliency, and hope for the future. Susan Young found that impulsivity may contribute in adaptive coping by enabling some ADHD grown-ups to continue to try new methods. In the face of demanding events and circumstances, and in spite of the drawbacks they have from cognitive and social problems, they might have a capability to bounce back. Therefore, for people with ADHD, the way they communicate is associated with their cognitive ability, which might mean they continuously examine, reassess, compensate, and adapt. Young, 2005. Shapiro, 2013, urges that experts help clients to see that they have many strengths and that ADHD is just one element of who they are. Additionally, they have made up for it most of their lives. validate that it might have been a tough struggle and that their lives can improve significantly. After a correct analysis, ADHD grown-ups are in a much better position to know which coping habits to keep and which are restricting, and to know what their particular symptoms are. Authors of the Swiss study contend that some core symptoms may hide behind strong coping strategies or specific workplace, and this decreases self-awareness of signs. Clinical psychologist Ellen B. Littman, Ph.D., gives the example of ADHD adults being hesitant to mingle in locations where they feel they can't keep up, using self-imposed seclusion as a way to handle what are, in fact, ADHD signs, such as difficulty in sustaining attention to discussions, being sidetracked by social stimuli, or even disrupting others and saying things that are later awkward. They keep their troubles hidden, and they have very negative conversations with themselves about their negative self-image. They don't want to seem needy. They do not want to ask for help. They want to appear like they have it together. But the reality is that your life isn't just really what's happening to you, but it's also the quality of your existence and how hard it is, and if you keep that hidden, nobody really is familiar with you. So, even when self-developed techniques are practical, without a comprehension of why they are needed, grown-ups with ADHD are restricted regarding self-knowledge and ideal quality of life, and they may presume they're being very lazy or unrestrained or selfish instead of attempting their best to manage a rowdy brain. Chapter 2. Executive Function. What is executive function? Executive function describes a set of cognitive processes and psychological skills that help an individual plan, screen, and effectively execute their objectives. These include attentional control, working memory, inhibition, and problem solving, a lot of which are thought to originate in the brain's prefrontal cortex. Many habits in which human beings engage, such as breathing or stepping out of the way of an approaching car, occur without conscious idea. Most others rely on executive function. Any process or goal pursuit that needs time management, decision-making, and storing info in a person's memory utilizes executive function to some degree. Since much of modern-day life is process-driven and demands that individuals set and meet objectives, disturbances in executive function can make it challenging for a person to be successful in school, at work, or in the household. For children and adults who deal with executive function, accommodations at work or school can help fill the spaces. However, it is very important to remember that executive function is among the slowest mental procedures to develop. Hence, many kids and teens who struggle with executive function might find that their abilities catch up over time and continue to enhance well into adulthood. What are the signs of poor executive function? Somebody who fights with executive functioning will likely have difficulty beginning or completing tasks, executing several steps of a project in series, and keeping their belongings organized. They may have a hard time to make choices or lose essential items often. Concerns with impulse or emotional control are a less obvious sign of an executive functioning deficit. Someone with underdeveloped executive functioning may act without thinking and may appear excessively emotional sometimes. This is because both behavioral and emotional inhibition are crucial elements of executive functioning. Executive dysfunction may appear similar to ADHD. Indeed, some specialists presume that ADHD is a condition of executive function. Many people with ADHD, particularly kids, typically struggle with several executive functions, in addition to other signs like hyperactivity and distractibility. Chapter 3. Common Myths about ADHD. It should come as no surprise that many individuals withstand the extremely idea of ADHD's existence. Some excitedly embrace myths about ADHD, making wild and inaccurate claims that hurt people with this very real condition. It's time to put these myths to bed at last. Here is what you really need to know. 1. Myth: ADHD isn't real, or is at least overdiagnosed. Proof of ADHD exists at the very least as far back as the 18th century. Like much else, it's only been in current years that medical professionals have truly understood the condition. Some grown-ups hesitate to accept that which they can't see or evaluate with a single test. That doesn't make ADHD any less real. For children with this disorder, denying its existence is a serious disservice. Denying ADHD convinces people with ADHD that they're flawed and bad. It convinces parents that they really need to more harshly penalize kids with ADHD for behavior they can't manage. That is a bad result for everybody. The information suggests that ADHD may actually be underdiagnosed, specifically among girls. Even when companies do properly detect ADHD, there is another problem. Less than half of kids with ADHD get therapy. ADHD treatment works best when it combines medication and therapy, and for some kids, therapy might ultimately remove the need for medication. 2. Myth: ADHD is a childhood illness. Kids are more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than grown-ups because symptoms of ADHD tend to first appear in youth. Children are less proficient at hiding their suffering than adults, but that doesn't mean ADHD disappears in their adult years. 70% of kids detected with ADHD will grow into adults with ADHD. Some adults with ADHD didn't have symptoms in childhood or were not identified, so ADHD in grown-ups may go unnoticed. Unattended ADHD can have catastrophic repercussions for an adult's profession and relationships. Sometimes, ADHD might manifest as another issue, such as depression or substance abuse. Unattended ADHD is linked to a host of negative results, including various addictions. 3. Myth: all people with ADHD are active. Medical professionals recognize two distinct conditions: attention deficit disorder, ADD, and attention deficit disorder, ADHD. Since more people are identified with ADHD than ADD, and because some diagnostic handbooks merge them into one analysis, ADHD has gotten substantially more attention. Some people with ADD, ADHD struggle primarily with inattention, not hyperactivity. They may end up being hyperfocused, struggle with persistent boredom, have difficulty following a train of thought, struggle to listen to others, or find themselves distracted by ordinary tasks, while hesitating the efficiency of more vital ones. While hyperactivity is one dead giveaway of ADHD, not being active doesn't always mean an individual lacks an attention condition. 4. Myth: ADHD medications are pretty dangerous. Every medication is possibly hazardous. That's no less true for ADHD drugs, which come with some bad effects. That is why it is so essential for people taking ADHD medications to be kept track of diligently by a qualified psychiatrist skilled at the treatment and management of ADHD. There are some medication choices, so it is necessary to talk about bad side effects and treatment goals to find the right drug for you or your child. Additionally, because ADHD drugs can be addicting, they should never ever be taken without the supervision of a medical professional. Self-diagnosing with ADHD and then self-medicating is very harmful. For people with ADHD, not taking medication is often more harmful than using medication. Without treatment, ADHD increases the risk of a range of issues, and that includes drug abuse and quitting school. Parents concerned about giving their kids medication should take heart and know that medication isn't only safe, but a way to lower tons of the threats connected with ADHD. 5. Myth: ADHD needs to be a barrier to success. A medical diagnosis of ADHD can be scary, specifically when the first treatment alternative does not work. Parents or caretakers may be concerned that in the real world, their children will have a hard time and go to pieces. It doesn't have to be that way. ADHD is a disease, but it also comes with its own unique set of skills: high energy, creativity, a desire to try new things, and much more. People with ADHD can and do be successful at the greatest levels in each occupation. As adults, people with ADHD usually find that the things that landed them in trouble during youth are assets in demanding professions and flourishing relationships. Chapter 4: Tips for Gifted Adults with ADHD. Amongst the many myths and misconceptions of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is that exceptionally clever people cannot have ADHD, or, alternatively, that ADHD comes prepackaged with gifts of creative skill and high intelligence. Still, as Dr. Thomas Brown clarifies in The Mysteries of ADD and High IQ, ADHD has nothing to do with how clever a person is. Some people with ADD are super smart on IQ tests, many score in the typical range, and some are much lower. The troubles from ADHD result not by lack of smarts, but by chronic inability to release their smarts in efficient work and in agreeing other individuals. Or, as Dr. Russell Barkley is famous for saying, ADHD is not a problem with knowing what to do. It is a problem of doing what you know. 2 times the obstacle. Giftedness coexisting with ADHD is an example of twice exceptionality, or 2E. 2 exceptionalities that differ from how the majority of people experience life and learning. See also The Twice Exceptional Adult by Dr. Dan Peters. It is not uncommon for adults to understand later in life that they are 2E, in part because, as children, they were able to compensate rather for ADHD symptoms, or their ADHD took center stage and precluded any recognition of giftedness. Dr. Marianne Kouzagianakis, co-author of Misdiagnosis and Dual Medical Diagnosis of Gifted Kids and Adults, 2nd edition, reminds us that, while some gifted kids are erroneously identified and medicated for mental health disorders they don't have, others are unrecognized for learning or mental illnesses they do have. Eric Tivers, an accredited clinical social worker, coach, and podcaster at ADHD Rewired, works with many clients who are both gifted and have ADHD. Eric learned he had ADHD in college, and he remembers as though it were the other day being detected and getting treatment. As he recently told Linda Rogley at the online ADHD Women's Palooza, "I felt normal for the first time. I had the ability to actually read and comprehend what I read, and for the first time in my life I was getting A's." However, as he raised the bar for himself, he also raised his anxiety about preserving success. Many people with ADHD typically do not know if they can repeat tomorrow what they are able to do today, nor do they understand how they had the ability to succeed yesterday at what they appear incapable of doing now. Eric has noticed that when highly intelligent clients with ADHD get stuck or are overwhelmed, they get flooded more easily or close down. Thomas Brown explains that psychological flooding happens when the working memory problems of ADHD allow a short-term feeling to end up being too strong, flooding the brain with one intense emotion. In the gifted, who typically have what Eric calls a large pool of capacity and also uncommon strength, the aggravation of not being able to perform routine tasks easily, having to decrease to normal speed, or just being overtaxed concerning executive functioning triggers feelings that rapidly become unmanageable or the sole focus of their attention. An ADHD coach's tips for 2E grown-ups. To help with psychological flooding and other 2E difficulties, Eric Tivers offers these 3 pointers for anyone who both has ADHD and is smarter than the typical bear. 1. Accept that giftedness is not always a present. Both ADHD and giftedness are inadequately named, just because ADHD isn't mostly about attention deficits or hyperactivity, and giftedness can feel like anything but a present. Eric says gifted people can internalize expectations that every little thing should come quickly, or they should have the ability to succeed at anything just because they're highly intelligent or unusually skilled. Those expectations are not proper in general, and they are even more troublesome for the ones with ADHD, for whom some aspects of even everyday living that do come easily for other people are inherently more difficult. 2. Practice self-compassion. Specifically for grown-ups with ADHD who went many years undiagnosed, impractical expectations combined with a lack of self-understanding can cause constant self-criticism. Why can't I do this? Why did I screw this up again? Eric suggests using the exact same words, but changing the emphasis and tone to that of interest and self-knowledge. Why can't I do this? Why did I screw this up again? Why is this so hard? Why do I keep making that same error? Rather than self-criticism, he motivates clients to take an analytical method to themselves, to challenge themselves to determine what is not working, and to find solutions and workarounds. Once they have had the chance to overcome a significant struggle and have some success, they can gain confidence and even begin to really wonder what else they might be able to do. There are so many things that I'm really bad at, he confesses with a laugh, but I do not spend my time concentrating on that stuff. I'm not ignoring it, but it's about requesting for help and being all right with the fact that you need assist with some things. 3. Find community. Whether it is giftedness or ADHD, Eric urges, do not just read about it. Do not just listen to the podcast. Find community. This is specifically essential because of the stigma of ADHD and what he refers to as the reverse stigma of giftedness. Find a neighborhood where you can share your stories and hear people say the thing that you presumed only you thought. The significance of community is one reason he has focused over the last few years on coaching and accountability group work. While some people view both ADHD and giftedness as gifts, Eric says that they are not gifts he would choose to give anyone he appreciated. Still, they do offer opportunities. When obstacles are put in our course and we are able to find ways to work around those things, we might discover gifts as we discover workarounds. Sometimes, gifts of grit, resilience, self-advocacy, self-determination, and self-awareness are what we find in our journey on the roadway less traveled. Chapter 5. Can a computer game help kids with ADHD? Wouldn't it be fantastic if playing computer games could help kids with ADHD? New research suggests that playing a computer game for 25 minutes a day may aid with inattention. And that's good news because negligence, one of the core signs of ADHD, can be one of the most difficult to deal with. Attention deficit disorder is just one of the most commonly detected pediatric neurodevelopment disorders. ADHD affects an approximated 6.1 million kids in the U.S., or 9.4% of U.S. kids. The problems kids experience because of the ongoing challenges with attention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity puts a burden on them and their families. While many children with ADHD gain from the medications and behavioral therapy that are the present requirements of care, many continue to struggle. It's not just school performance that is affected. Domesticity can also be challenging. The children know it too, and they usually experience anxiety or negative self-image. In a field of therapies, why a video game? The capability to concentrate is a rather critical skill, both for school and for social interaction. As a core deficit in ADHD, it is an essential target for therapy. Medications help, but they can be costly and for some children trigger negative effects. Behavioral therapy has been revealed to be valuable, but can be difficult for families to access. What about cognitive training? Various methods are available, but meta-analyses expose that the studies on them have used inadequate method. In other words, we do not know if they work. Meanwhile, some families spend thousands of dollars and numerous hours on them, hoping to help their kids. In this environment, an intervention that families can use in the home is a welcome one. Kids with ADHD are popular to really love computer games, so the idea of a video game-like treatment is amazing. The computer game intervention for ADHD. The new research study in The Lancet has examined just that. The computer game is AKL-T01, an investigational digital therapeutic developed at Akili Interactive Labs in Boston. This game is designed to particularly target cognitive interference, or the incapability to ignore competing stimuli. Increasingly more, we're considering kids with ADHD not as kids who can't pay more attention to just one thing, but as children who can't stop focusing on every little thing. It would be a very real advantage if they could acquire cognitive control to choose where to direct their attention when two things are contending for it. According to the designers, AKL-T01 was developed to engage pediatric users through computer game graphics and benefit loops, and to use real-time adaptive systems that continually individualize interference trouble on the basis of the user's ability and progression. Specifically, AKL-T01 targets attentional control to manage contending jobs and to efficiently, flexibly shift attention between jobs. Farther, divided and selective attention systems are needed to process several tasks at the same time. That may sound complex, but any parent of a kid with ADHD knows what it means when they consider homework time. The study. The study used what's considered the gold standard of study design, a randomized, double-blind, parallel group, controlled trial. 348 kids between the ages of 8 and 12 with ADHD were randomized to either the video game intervention on a tablet or a control intervention. They were taken off any ADHD medications they were using. Then, the children dipped into home for 25 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 4 weeks. To examine whether it helped, the researchers measured the test of variables of attention, TOVA. Particularly, they looked at the mean change in the Attention Efficiency Index, API, which is a composite rating derived from the TOVA. The mean change, SD, from standard on the composite score from the TOVA API was 0.93 in the interference group and 0.03 in the control group, adjusted p-value 0.0060. That's a small but significant impact in enhancing attention, and with minimal effort from parents or caretakers or bad side effects. A couple of children got moderate headaches. Where does that leave us? As is always the case with studies like this, questions stay. Will this go the way of other interventions, which end up to teach the kid how to do well on the intervention but do not translate to other environments? Simply put, will your kid just get good at the computer game, or will they get a lot better at their homework? Will the results last, or will the child have to keep playing the game every day? Still, it's an appealing research study. Parents will be asking, where can I get this? Now, the designers are going through the approval process with the FDA, which means AKL T01 isn't readily available to the general public yet. Chapter 6. Can ADHD medication prevent suicide? In spite of controversy, ADHD is considered by experts to be underdiagnosed and undertreated in children and grown-ups. Undertreatment worsens problems with self-confidence, executive function, work, and efficiency, with negative effects on mood and anxiety. ADHD persisting into adulthood impairs feeling regulation, sense of self, efficiency, and marital function. Treating ADHD has been shown to prevent motor vehicle mishaps, injuries, and criminal conduct. Most people with ADHD are typically gifted, but warded off, and left feeling exceptionally annoyed and misinterpreted. The economic impact of ADHD is estimated to be in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year, much of that cost borne directly by families, and is a major cause of missed school and work. Analysis of ADHD is typically complex, as ADHD can overlap with other conditions, and treatment is challenging due to the high cost and the fact that medication alone is not enough. Also, lots of people presume they have ADHD when they may not. Because of concern about rising rate of suicide, there has been more concentrate on ADHD and suicide crises, which are triggered by continuous psychological pain and vulnerability. Does treatment of ADHD prevent suicide? To clarify the relationship between without treatment ADHD and suicide, scientists performed a population-based research study, released in the diary Biological Psychiatry, Chang et al. 2020. Medication for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and risk for suicide attempts. Using data from the Truven Market Scan commercial claims and encounters databases, they associated information from ages 5 and up. The data covers about 146 million people, spanning 2005 to 2014, representing almost half of the United States population. They looked at prescription claims to recognize common ADHD medications, which include stimulants like amphetamine salts, or in other words Adderall, other amphetamine variations, methylphenidate, meaning Ritalin, and a non-stimulant medication, atomoxetine. The database reports on results including emergency situation department visits, ambulance use, inpatient hospitalization, and suicide efforts, in addition to information about additional diagnoses. Findings: of the 146 million people in the database, 3.87 million had ADHD medical diagnoses, about 48% of them women. Of those identified with ADHD, roughly 85% got at the very least one prescription for ADHD medication over the study period. Scientists reported on suicide efforts, 0.1% of the guys and 0.2% of the women, 2,288 and 3,576 people respectively, attempted suicide at least once. Clients with ADHD were substantially more likely to attempt suicide than those without ADHD. Men were at a 4.7% increased risk, and women at a 4.9-fold increased risk. Throughout months when people were taking medication, the risk of suicide attempts was 31% lower across the entire group. Looking from individual to individual, the risk of a suicide effort was 39% lower when people with ADHD were taking medications than when they were not. These differences were comparable for males and females. The decrease in suicide risk held for all age groups. See table right below. It only held for stimulant medication types and held no matter whether there was also a health diagnosis of depression or substance use disorder. The longer people were on medication, the greater the risk reduction. For every year of medication treatment, suicide risk was 28% lower. Especially, patients were at increased suicide risk right around the time they started stimulant medication, in the 3 months before and 3 months following, may be related to severity of issues resulting in the start of treatment and or concurrent issues, example depression at that time, and or simply because medications facilitated self-destructive conduct by restoring inspiration, and or a direct influence of beginning medication. The risk of non-suicide depression-related events was 28% lower throughout medicated months. Implications: this data from over 146 million United States citizens is compelling. This is a huge research study looking at real-world outcomes, with millions of ADHD clients across the age period. While there's room for argument about the suitability of medications, the accessibility of alternative interventions, the reasons for rising up ADHD analysis rates, and debates surrounding ADHD treatment in general, these results support the potential protecting value of stimulant medications for clients diagnosed with ADHD. Suicide attempts were decreased throughout months when patients took medications, and with a higher duration of constant treatment, the risk went on to decrease over time. Special caution is needed in the time leading up to and following starting medications, as suicide effort risk was higher 3 months before and after treatment started. Those findings support suggestions that ADHD treatment take place in more specialized care settings, with closer follow-up to ensure adherence with treatment in time and to keep an eye on for increased risk. Lots of people begin and stop medications without calling their clinicians, and while clients also might prefer to get refills so they do not have to come in for appointments, failing to appropriately keep track of for treatment reaction, adherence, and unfavorable events puts lives on the line. Since this is a retrospective database research study, positive potential research studies following real clients throughout treatment are required to understand whether stimulant medications actually prevent suicide attempts or whether this is only a connection. Additionally, prospective studies with clients in real-world treatment settings will offer necessary detail about other essential elements, negative reactions, social and occupation impact, and other health outcomes, in addition to clarifying how treatment may protect against suicide. Interestingly, since it wasn't possible to tell from this research study whether clients receiving medication had been accurately detected with ADHD, it is possible that patients getting medication who did not have ADHD might have seen a benefit. Future research resolving this question would be useful given how typical it is for people to seek and get stimulant medications without a clear ADHD analysis. Chapter 7: ADHD and Emotional Trauma. Can psychological trauma imitate ADHD? What is the association of ADHD with psychological trauma? It turns out that the relation between ADHD and psychological trauma is diverse. It is not a bad time to review this. During periods of collective anxiety, like what we're now experiencing with the COVID-19 outbreak, some people will re-experience traumatic fears or anxieties. Those might be parents or caretakers or adults with ADHD. Some kids will feel heightened fears and anxieties either from seeing newspaper article or from detecting parental anxieties. How is trauma different than stress? Everybody experiences stress. Good stress is a challenge that we feel able to deal with or overcome. This kind of tension builds confidence and psychological strength. Healthy development needs these types of obstacles. Typical bad tension is an upsetting or difficult situation that we feel we couldn't handle efficiently. However, it is over and it does not stay with us. We appear able to recover to our baseline of feelings and to resume our usual way of being. This also happens to everyone. Having said that, a third circumstance is different. A frightening event activates a fight or flight response. The biology of this response includes a shot of cortisol and adrenaline that we feel physically. This emergency response system in the body adds physical strength, reduces real pain, and speeds up response time. It's crucial for survival in an unexpected physical life or death circumstance like a physical attack. In some cases, we still get better. However, for some people, at times, the flight or fight reaction stays on. That could be because of personal sensitivity, or it may be as a result of the circumstance. For instance, no physical or verbal response is feasible. Or, a kid might have had continuous negative events that take a toll on the development of self-regulation with time. Those continuous events constantly put a kid in a state of emotional stimulation and fight or flight emotions. Some examples of sustained negative events might include coping with a mentally violent individual, dependency in the family, physical conflict in the home, sustained physical hardship such as insufficient real estate, seeing or experiencing serious violence in the community, upsetting separation from or loss of a caretaker because of a broad release to a war zone, incarceration or death, suffering frequent bigotry and discrimination as a minority person, the emotional consequences of an unstable adult divorce. This constant activation of an alarm state is hazardous to health and development. It can overwhelm a kid's developing psychological capabilities so that they cannot achieve the level of self-regulation they otherwise might. The outcome? As a kid or adult grows, they tend to overinterpret issues or challenges as much more serious than they are. They might overreact to a mild insult or offhand remark, quickly shock, or experience poor sleep, chronic anxiety, and ultimately poorer health. If we are in this circumstance, we experience poor attention, impulsivity, up and down feelings, and feel overwhelmed by additional tension. Coping with life's everyday hassles can seem too hard. If a mom experienced extreme emotional stress while she was pregnant, or if the kid experienced abuse or other trauma early in life, this inner emergency situation alarm may be switched on throughout development. In that case, the child also may look like they have ADHD. The kid might be neglectful, irritable, overreactive to challenge, even reactively aggressive. However, they don't truly have ADHD. They have a chronic trauma response. The triple whammy of ADHD and emotional trauma. The first manner in which psychological trauma and ADHD relate, then, is that emotional trauma, either throughout youth and even before birth, can at times lead to a simulate of ADHD that is not actually ADHD. In this case, the right treatment may not be an ADHD treatment, but a treatment for emotional trauma, such as trauma-based cognitive behavior therapy. The second way they relate is that some people have both. People with ADHD tend to have more bad things happen. This is for several reasons: high impulsivity, altered or weaker judgment of social circumstances, looking for elusive peer approval, attraction to risky situations for the excitement or the enjoyment. Research shows that having actually ADHD is connected with a higher rate of distressing events going on. The third reason for overlap is maybe the most slippery. Given the exact same unsafe situation, people with ADHD are more likely than other individuals to experience it as traumatic. That relates to the increased sensitivity to experience that people with ADHD seem to have, which I alluded to earlier. In addition, some individuals with ADHD don't have strong coping systems, such as the ability to reduce distressing thoughts and put them out of mind. Adding this all up, the bad news is that kids and adults with ADHD are 3 times as likely as other children and grown-ups to get post-traumatic stress disorder. The good news? Even at that, only a minority will ever have this experience. Take-home message. If your kid appears to have unexpectedly developed symptoms of ADHD, consider whether something emotionally very upsetting or terrible might have happened or might still be going on. Did they experience online bullying or some physical threats? Some investigation here might be suitable and can be performed by a competent clinician if the child or teenager isn't comfortable sharing with a caretaker. If they are not reacting well to treatment or help for ADHD, or if you know there's a challenging history or a difficult ongoing circumstance like some of those noted earlier, consider whether your kid may need additional coping support, therapy, or added coping help that may be either rather than or in addition to being translucented the lens of ADHD. If there is a traumatic history, societal stress and anxieties like the present pandemic can be activating and result in worsening of conduct or coping. This may indicate a real need for some added short-term support or counseling. During this pandemic, many psychological health providers are licensed to offer support remotely. Respect yourself, be kind to your children, and stay well. Chapter 8. ADHD is pushing romantic partners to progress people. I have a saying that a great relationship pushes you to end up being a much better person. There is no one like a romantic partner in a dedicated relationship to push us to handle our issues and to call us out on our bad behavior. They're not always 100% right, and it is not always a pretty process. But if the relationship is to last, both people need to put in the effort to be better partners. The friction gradually wears down the rough spots so that ideally the couple meshes better. This is a universal process that definitely applies to each couple, but including challenges to the relationship, like those that come along with ADHD, can make it that a lot more essential that both partners bring their best. When there are these added concerns, the universal battles can feel even more challenging to overcome. Ultimately, every couple needs to figure out how to negotiate differences so that both partners feel like they're getting their needs met. Any 2 people will at times have different desires, preferences, opinions, or needs. If one partner has ADHD and one doesn't, that can add to those distinctions. When partners haven't yet figured out how to live well together, it can look like the ADHD has become an insurmountable obstacle. We're too different. We will never ever want the exact same things. And by the way, the main problem here is you, not me. The bad news of this is that no, you definitely won't want all the same things. Some of this may be associated with one of you having ADHD and one not, but you would still have differences even if neither, or both of you, had ADHD, if you were in a same-sex relationship, if you both grew up in Minnesota, whatever. The bright side, though, is that happy couples still have insurmountable differences. They just figured out which are the differences to stop attempting to prevail over, instead concentrating on the parts of the relationship that are working well. ADHD can make relationships harder. I at times describe ADHD as a condition of actualizing good intents. Folks with ADHD know what they are supposed to do, and where, when, why, and how. But somewhere between the understanding and the doing, something else happens. They are irregular and feel bad when they fail. In fact, because they fail more regularly than folks without ADHD, they at times feel really bad, because damn it, it occurred again. And yet that frustration doesn't translate dependably enough into different actions next time. It's frustrating and confusing. This isn't practically getting the job done at school or work. It also impacts their interactions with friends and romantic partners. It makes it tougher to be the partner that they would like to be consistent, reputable, and predictable. Meanwhile, the romantic partner who initially was forgiving and going to pick up the slack eventually tires of it and ends up being more impatient, upset, critical, and controlling. In other words, they become someone in the relationship that they don't want to be. Under these circumstances, it's simple to develop a relationship dynamic where each partner draws out more of the worst from the other, instead of the best, as they fight to get their different needs met. In some research that I did into couples with one ADHD partner, Tuckman 2019, I found that those who felt that ADHD was the least well managed also reported the least relationship and sexual satisfaction. They were unhappy but didn't know how to make it better. They were trapped in a tug-of-war that they could not get out of. If they were using any treatment techniques, they didn't find them all that effective, but they also didn't put in as much effort as they could, and they most likely felt that their partner was not putting in enough effort either. Did the absence of effort come from the absence of effectiveness, or vice versa? Or both? You can bet that they weren't having much sex, and when they did, it most likely didn't have the positive benefit on general relationship fulfillment that it could have. But it doesn't need to if you work as a team. As much as inadequately managed ADHD can be the straw that breaks the camel's back in a relationship, there were also a considerable number of couples in my survey who were very happy together, and not just the young'uns who are still in the simple early days of a relationship. Typically, what split up the least and most happy couples was a cluster of different aspects associated with the partners feeling like they were interacting on the same group. They both put in the effort on handling ADHD, being sexually generous, and asking for what they want. Obviously, it is much easier to be a pretty good group player when you feel like your partner is being similarly giving, even if equal can look different between the two of you. So the huge question then is, what would it take for you to be that generous partner that you want to be? This needs two things. First of all, you really need to show stability and not let yourself slack off when something is hard or get defensive when your faster ways are mentioned. You need to be going to actually listen to what your partner wants and have a mainly efficient conversation about it. Second, you really need to be direct about what you really want from your partner and call them out respectfully when they fall short. Simply put, you really need to push both yourself and also your partner to be a much better person. A few of this will involve educating yourselves about ADHD and how to work better together, looking for reliable treatments, perhaps doing some individual or couples therapy, etc. This won't resolve all your relationship problems, but it will ideally reduce the apparent issues, which clears the space to work on some of those less obvious issues. For the individual with ADHD, this might involve truly pushing themselves to step up and be more constant, take their partner's requests more seriously, and take ownership of it when they drop the ball, just because nobody is flawless. Meanwhile, the non-ADHD partner might need to work on managing their own anxiety and determining what they can let go without seeming like they are selling themselves short. Both partners need to ask straight for what they really need, but also search for a really good effort by the other, particularly when things don't work out as hoped. ADHD can be both an easy excuse or an easy scapegoat for other relationship issues, so resist the temptation. Take ADHD seriously and work to comprehend and manage it, but don't get stuck on it. There's more to relationships and life than just ADHD. Bring your best, push your partner to bring their best, and enjoy the ways that you complement each other. Chapter 9. Gauging family stress when a child has ADHD. Families report substantial tension when a child has ADHD, even after their kid is successfully treated. Up until now, families have generally received little help even as their well-being suffers. Now, scientists have created a new tool to help doctors support these families. The Impact 1.0 rating scale was co-created by scientists and families using design thinking approaches. ADHD in the pediatrician's office. Kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder can have a hard time immensely. Their brains don't work like the other kids do, and they may have a hard time in several parts of their lives. By necessity, the pediatricians, who now take care of almost half of these kids, concentrate on the care of the kid. Pediatricians look at reports from instructors and parents, try to assist in behavioral and learning supports at school, advise parents about behavior management at home, prescribe and keep track of complex medications, all in 15-minute visits. Pediatricians must prioritize how children are doing in school simply because this is the area they have the time and tools to deal with. The kids usually do substantially better on stimulant medications combined with school supports, and their parents are delighted by their child's academic success. Even so, even as kids do better in school, families continue to struggle. Families report ongoing tension related to everyday activities and a lower lifestyle contrasted with those raising children without ADHD. These pain points put the well-being of the family at risk in time and can result in parent stress out. There are the chaotic mornings and the wild energy at bedtime when the medication isn't on board to help. Parents find they worry about their child now and carry fears about that kid's future. They are criticized by complete strangers throughout the embarrassing episodes in public places when their child does something impulsive. Lacking a practical tool that fits into short office visits, pediatricians have not had an efficient way to address these problems. The existing tools look for sweeping impairments, both at home and school, but they don't catch the daily difficulties that wear on families. Asking families about the areas of tension is like opening a can of worms. Pediatricians might ask in a more general way like, "How are things going?" Narissa Bauer, MD, told me. She is the lead author on the research study and a developmental pediatrician, a professional in pediatric growth-related conditions. If the parent isn't attempting to say, "I have real issues about X, Y, or Z," then that's a missed chance to support the family. So, we wanted to find out how to develop a procedure for lifestyle around ADHD care that could be used in primary care practice. One that can be used quickly, but then opens that conversation around those issue parts. So that way we can really hone in on the additional support families need. These are the specifics Dr. Bauer's group determined as important for treatment decision-making, international mental change, and fulfillment with care. Design thinking. One of the most compelling features of this research study is the use of design thinking techniques, initially used in business and engineering, to co-create the Impact 1.0 rating scale with families. The study's authors noted that this increases its face validity and can cause conversations that are practical and family-centered. It was a very interesting way of doing things, Dr. Bauer told me. It's now being a method, so to speak, that people are using and introducing it to medicine to really find out practical options, but in a very different way of doing things. I love the idea simply because you welcome the actual stakeholders and try to comprehend their strong pain points and what they really need before you begin revamping or be revising a process in the healthcare system. At the time of the study's examinations, Narissa Bauer was an associate professor at Indiana University School of Medicine and said the research designers were instrumental in bringing the design thinking method to the work. The group got parents as an advisory board in the creation of the Impact 1.0 scale, asking them whether what they were doing made sense. What other pain points did we need to consider? We really need to be associated with the families. We need to get their perspective. I've seen many families throughout years that I've been dealing with ADHD, and obviously, I know a ton of stories. However, I think I was truly humbled by the fact that when I began actually working closely with family consultants and getting to go them on this level, rather than me coming up with the resolution, we were co-creating things together. That's the prettiness of this, beginning to see things in a very different way, Dr. Bauer explained. The Impact 1.0 scale. The Impact scale was designed for clinician use throughout primary care follow-up visits in combination with the Vanderbilt, the standard ADHD ranking scale, to get at those essential pain points that are making it hard on families. On a 5-point scale, Impact 1.0 rates how typically, in the past 4 weeks, concerns have happened. It looks at 4 main domains: misdeed, siblings, time, and school. Impact 1.0 asks about phone calls from teachers, or times when parents worry that teachers think negatively about their kid. It asks about misdeed at social events, meal times, or while running errands in public. The scale also addresses the parents' or caretaker's level of functioning by asking if parents feel they don't have enough time to give their other kids attention, or feel they don't have some time to get things done around the home, or find a little time to unwind. Finally, the scale takes a look at the crucial stressors around siblings by asking about physical or verbal fights, the ability of siblings to interact to finish household jobs. It even asks whether siblings don't want to be around the kid with ADHD. This tool seems really promising as a way to effectively connect with families about components of their lives that sound honestly heartbreaking. While Dr. Bauer says the group is carrying out further study to improve the tools, Impact 1.0 is a verified tool prepared for use in the medical care office. This has been ADHD: Traumas, Symptoms, Medication, Treatments, and Tips. Written by Heather Foreman. Narrated by Rory Young.